The bridge, not long or wide, is a simple wooden structure that spans the narrow yet profound gap between past disappointments and future uncertainties. Let me introduce myself. I'm Lyle Jetterman, now 38, a man who previously only differed from others in that he was the husband of 36-year-old Gloria and the father of 12-year-old Robert and 8-year-old Anna. It's a pleasant family picture, albeit with a significant financial burden. To meet my duties as a husband and father, I worked at Countryman Realtor for 5 years before Gabriel Zillow bought the company from Bernie Schleifer. Real estate wasn't my first career choice, or even my desired one. I started my career after graduating from law school. At that time, I had been married to Gloria for 3 years, and she was pregnant when I graduated. The job market for young lawyers wasn't very promising, but Gloria's pregnancy gave me a strong incentive to find a job that could support my family. The initial job I secured was at a law firm specializing in representing banks during home loan closings. It wasn't the career I had envisioned, but it was employment. While I pursued my law degree, Gloria worked as a bank teller to support us both. Her earnings covered rent and necessities, while I worked part-time jobs to supplement our income. My education was funded through loans and scholarships, but I aimed for a future with the Department of Education. Since Gloria became pregnant around my law school graduation, I accepted the job offer, marking the first of many compromises in married life. In those bygone days, banks extended loans to individual homebuyers for house purchases, a profession considered genteel for lawyers. I sat at the desk handling house-flipping transactions on behalf of lending institutions. During mortgage closings, buyers paid the bank a commission of roughly $500 for my services. The law firm received this sum along with an additional $500 from the insurance company. Each successful closing meant earning a solid $1,000 when we sealed the deal. Naturally, the firm profited, and I received a small portion as my salary. It seems all good things must end, and honorable frugality gives way to insatiable greed. Shortly after my wife Gloria gave birth to our second child, the consolidation of small banks into larger ones, which were then absorbed by even bigger ones, reshaped the banking landscape. Retail loans became obsolete as banking transitioned into a wholesale trade, operating at an industrial scale. Each morning, I'd confront a stack of mortgage paperwork at work, slated for same-day closings. While profits likely soared, the frenetic pace of simultaneous house closings left me with an uneasy feeling about the sustainability of this model. Over my 7-year legal career, I didn't advance to partnership, but ascended to the esteemed status of a private contractor, earning $75 per closing. With 7 or 8 loans closed daily, 5, and sometimes 6 days a week, my income was respectable. However, I harbored doubts about the longevity of this arrangement, sensing an impending downturn. Bernard Schleifer, or Bernie as he preferred, approached me. Seeking a legally savvy individual, Bernie aimed to expand his company, Countryman Real Estate. With his main contract transitioning to the Sunbelt, Bernie eyed growth. His company held shares in the Scarlet Woods development, boasting 100 approved lots with plans for 400 more. Strategically located 2 miles from a tech park with 2,000 high-tech jobs on the horizon, Bernie, a builder-developer, excelled at securing financing for growth projects. However, he struggled to market to homeowners seeking upgrades or adjustable-rate mortgages. Strangely enough, when Bernie and I first met, everything clicked. I thrived on selling houses and paid close attention to details, especially when it came to managing the flurry of paperwork involved in transactions. Drawing from lessons learned from previous employers, I implemented profit center strategies, boosting Bernie's sales by leveraging partnerships with home insurance agents, movers, gardeners, and more. We swiftly evolved into a comprehensive agency with one goal: maximizing home sales and capitalizing on associated services. Bernie wasted no time in initiating construction projects, while I diligently managed day-to-day operations. He handled major deals, while I took care of smaller ones, earning a handsome salary as his trusted employee. Bernie foresaw the impending crisis. Bear Stearns served as a precursor, but the collapse of investment bank Lehman Brothers was the catalyst. Despite the looming catastrophe, Bernie remained optimistic, believing in real estate's inherent resilience. While the market plummeted, Bernie remained unfazed, confident in its eventual rebound. I focused on maximizing every opportunity, channeling profits into larger and more lucrative rural properties as part of Bernie's investment strategy. Bernie had only one concern. He felt like a significant figure in a small arena and desired to dive into the vast ocean. One evening, during drinks after work, he dropped the bombshell. "I've sold everything." "What?" "Take it easy. The new owner won't shake things up, at least not right away." Once again, Bernie proved correct. Upon meeting Gabe Zello, my initial impression was of his youthfulness. Not yet 30, he orchestrated Bernie's buyout. Taller and younger than me, Gabe possessed a striking, blonde-haired, Adonis-like appearance, embodying the epitome of a business prodigy superstar. Though I should have felt envy toward the young man, his charm and amiability made it difficult to be resentful. Working for him proved enjoyable as well. Approaching 50, Bernie was ambitious, yet fundamentally cautious. In contrast, Gabe thrived on transparency and risk-taking. He operated with everything laid bare for all to see, always pushing the boundaries. It became evident early on that his investment in a rural property had stretched his finances thin. Gabe leaned more toward financing than construction, and leaned more into management than salesmanship. He relished in quick profits, and when the real estate market rebounded, his wager on Countryman Real Estate clearly paid off. Meanwhile, Bernie headed to Florida, drawn to the allure of a large real estate venture. The night before his departure, I wished him luck. "Come with me, baby," he said. "No, I'm not a child anymore. I have a wife and 2 teenagers to support," I replied. "Okay, but someday you'll regret it." I hoped not, but I checked the job market. There's not much left of my old company. Stephen Pender, one of the junior partners, managed to weather the collapse. He was glad to hear from me, but offered only 1/3 of my current earnings, so I worked diligently to ensure Countryman Real Estate stayed afloat. Overall, I was content working for Gabe, as we called him. He treated me well and allowed me to manage the office day to day. Did I have any doubts about him? Yes, but my only grievance with the boss was minor. Bernie never hosted a formal Christmas party, but Gabe took it to the opposite extreme. He rented one of the finest vacation spots in Saratoga, albeit during the off-season, for a hefty sum. The next party, held on the first Saturday in December, was for staff, contractors, bankers, and realtors. It was a lavish affair with a large guest list. Gabe spared no expense. Well, it was his money, and perhaps there was a legitimate business rationale behind it all. My discontent began around midnight and intensified throughout the night. You see, I arrived with the most attractive woman in the venue on my arm. I married Gloria right after college when we were both barely 22. While I was in law school, she worked a dead-end job to support us. I'll always be grateful to her for that, but she became pregnant by stopping birth control while I studied for the bar exam. In hindsight, the pregnancy may have been for the best. We've been good parents then and still are now. While I struggled with renting houses, Gloria raised our kids and worked nights to earn her doctorate in child psychology. When our youngest child started school, Gloria returned to work, landing a job at the State Department. She also embarked on what I now call her running career. Gloria could be described as chubby, especially compared to some undernourished models. But at 30, she transitioned from swimming at the YWCA pool twice a week and jogging occasionally to running long distances solo every morning. She started waking early to trek 5 miles cross-country. Each evening, she dedicated half an hour to sprinting. She held the fastest time among local female runners and was only surpassed once by national competitors in local 5K and 10K races. She even participated in the New York City Marathon 3 times, ranking among the top 100 women finishers. I'm not a stay-at-home type. I hit the gym at least 3 times a week and bike 20 miles on summer weekends. However, with over 5% body fat, I don't boast a physique sculpted by Michelangelo. I stood by Gloria in her endeavors, witnessing her early morning routines and returning sweaty as I woke the children. I felt proud of my wife, so when I entered the Christmas party with this tall, dark-haired beauty on my arm, conversations hushed and heads turned to behold the striking Gloria. Standing just over 6 feet tall in her 3-inch heels, she matched my height perfectly. Her raven locks cascaded over her shoulders, shimmering in the ballroom lamplight that evening. Despite her efforts to attend the party, Gloria wore a new form-fitting black dress. The scallop-trimmed attire hinted at her cleavage and was daringly short, showcasing her fabulously long runner's legs. This dress accentuated her flat stomach and sculpted rear, drawing admiring gazes. No longer a chubby girl, my wife exuded confidence as a remarkable woman. In Gabe's arms, she wasted no time in greeting us and joining him for a dance. Although I couldn't deny they made a lovely couple, his attentiveness seemed to border on inappropriate. Shortly before midnight, he approached her and kissed her passionately beneath the mistletoe. While I wasn't jealous, yes, my wife was attractive, but I trusted her. We had weathered many hardships together, From years of law school to raising children and paying off school loans, we had overcome illness and feticide. I felt sorry for couples who hadn't faced such trials together. It's adversity that strengthens a marriage. Gloria and I had faced everything together and remained deeply in love. As Gloria reveled in the attention while drinking, I dismissed it all as the result of the festive atmosphere. I escorted my wife home, and we didn't discuss the incident further. It was just an effect of too much hard drinks, I reassured myself. 6 months later, Memorial Day weekend rolled around, marking the halfway point of the year, which had been favorable for the real estate sector with a notable increase in clients. The final week of May experienced record-breaking heat, setting the hottest temperatures in the past decade. The company's operating account brimmed with cash from home sales, scheduled for deposit on the first business day of June. We planned to review the checks and electronically pay the banks when the office reopened after the 3-day weekend. "Are you joining us for the weekend camping trip?" Gabe inquired. He had rented a mountain cabin in the Adirondacks for Memorial Day weekend and had been talking about it incessantly for weeks. Though his invitation extended to Gloria and me, I was hesitant. "I'm not sure what Gloria's plans are," I replied, attempting to decline politely. "Oh, she's coming. She's looking forward to it," Gabe insisted confidently. I regarded him with uncertainty. "We discussed it on the phone," he added hastily. Why did I doubt him? Nevertheless, after he departed, I called Gloria, and indeed, she was enthusiastic about the trip. Reflecting on it now, I realized that this was the pivotal moment to avert disaster, but I failed to recognize it. I loved Gloria deeply and trusted her implicitly. According to MapQuest, the journey to Gabe's house would be challenging. I traded my Honda Accord for a 4-wheel drive SUV at the rental place. The last 20 miles of the route were along mountain roads, with the final 3 miles on dirt tracks. Having visited the Adirondack Mountains before, I knew firsthand their rugged nature. Gabe's residence lay southwest of Saranac Lake, and the journey took nearly 4 hours. The GPS guided us for the last 5 miles, leading us off the beltway onto the final 2 miles of semi-paved road that terminated at a sturdy wooden bridge. Though narrow, the recently renovated bridge spanned a ravine. While not excessively wide, the gap was deep, characteristic of the terrain typical of the Adirondack Mountains. It's such challenging terrain that preserves their untamed wilderness. I traversed the bridge cautiously, contemplating if there might be another route available. Despite the absence of an alternate exit on the GPS map, I felt like a mouse ensnared in a trap, wondering if there might be a lurking carnivore nearby. 3 miles along a rugged dirt road, we arrived at a 2-story house nestled on a clearing on the mountainside, roughly 1,000 feet below the summit. A dozen Adirondack peaks loomed to the north, providing a picturesque backdrop to this remote location where what appeared to be a rustic cabin had been erected. I parked the SUV in a meticulously maintained parking lot adjacent to 3 similarly upscale vehicles. Everything appeared pristine and meticulously tended to. The cabin itself exemplified the modern log-building aesthetic that evoked rustic charm while boasting contemporary comforts. Adorned in a fusion of modern and traditional paneling, it exuded the ambiance of a 19th century mountain retreat, albeit with modern conveniences. It was evident that Gabe had spared no expense to create this illusion. I had little doubt about his intended audience for such ostentation, and it certainly wasn't me. We were welcomed on the expansive porch adorned with Adirondack chairs and rustic decor by a group of 6 individuals. Among them were 3 young men, Gabe and 2 of his college acquaintances. Ken Lewis, the shortest among them at about 5'10", possessed a muscular physique akin to a weightlifter, nearing his 30s. Though starting to bald like Gabe, Ken's rugged features were accentuated by his muscular frame visible beneath his tight t-shirt and shorts. The second college friend, Glenn Sachs, stood at roughly 6 feet tall, slender with curly blonde hair. He appeared more aesthetically pleasing than Ken, his arms wrapped around a blonde woman introduced as Sharon. Sharon exuded beauty with her voluptuous figure and ample bust, likely in her 30s, possibly older, and noticeably 8 to 10 years Glenn's senior. Standing beside Ken was Robin, a slightly younger woman clearly accompanying him. She possessed a bubbly demeanor, short stature, and a well-endowed physique, with bosom seemingly disproportionate to her petite frame. The final member of the group stood tall with flowing brown hair. She was Paula Henry, one of those individuals often described as beautiful, possessing attractive, yet sharply defined, not entirely feminine features. Her demeanor suggested intelligence. a trait acknowledged by herself and others. Clearly the youngest among the women, she was a schoolmate of the boys. Despite the warm and overly enthusiastic welcome we received, there was an air of peculiarity. Gabe specifically greeted my wife with enthusiasm, while I received a more perfunctory acknowledgement. Meanwhile, his friend Paula regarded me with a scrutinizing gaze, akin to one observing a laboratory specimen before dissection. Dinner arrangements were swiftly made, prompting us to hastily stow our belongings in our designated second-floor bedroom adjacent to Gabe's master suite. Seated in the expansive Great Hall, serving as a combined living room, dining area, and game room, we indulged in gourmet microwave meals around the grand oak table. Though the food was delectable, it was evident that it came with considerable expense and minimal effort. Wine flowed generously, and I monitored my intake, mindful of my host's persistent attempts to replenish our glasses. Post-dinner, the group congregated around the gas fireplace on the terrace, where potent drinks and herb made an appearance, setting the tone for a weekend characterized by revelry and mild use. As I navigated through the situation with careful inquiry and astute observation, what initially seemed like a typical holiday weekend with my boss, his friends, and their partners took on a more intricate undertone. It soon became apparent that Robin had a fiancé elsewhere, while Sharon was married with 2 children and a husband waiting at home. Infidelity was treated with casual disregard and even humor. Paula remained fixated on me, seemingly detached from the group. Although she appeared to be aligned with Gabe, she showed no offense at his overt flirtation with my wife. Throughout the night, Gabe positioned himself mostly between Gloria and Paula, directing most of his conversation towards Gloria. My attempts to engage Paula were met with polite but distant interest, signaling me to refrain from further interaction. As midnight approached, the guests, still in high spirits, seemed prepared to retire for the night, yet an unspoken anticipation lingered. Suddenly, Gabe addressed me, acknowledging my probable fatigue from the lengthy drive. "Are you ready for bed, Lyle?" Gloria suggested, to which I jokingly insisted on another drink, offering it to Gabe. Internally, I fumed at Gabe's attempts to seduce my wife, questioning Gloria's behavior throughout the evening. Was she truly enamored with him? It was a night of waiting, but ultimately I emerged victorious. Returning to our designated room, Gloria entered the shower alone, and I refrained from joining her, recognizing the futility. Upon her exit, she sat undressed on the edge of the bed, inviting me to join her. "I want to enjoy this weekend," she expressed, reflecting on our challenging past and acknowledging my unwavering support. "You've been an exceptional partner and parent, sacrificing for my education and nurturing our family. Your dedication has not gone unnoticed. I'm proud to be your wife." I woke to the morning sunlight flooding through the open blinds of the spacious bedroom window. Typically, Gloria rose much earlier than I did for my morning jog, but last night's indulgence in hard drinks and bang had its effects. Rising from bed, I drew the curtains shut and made my way to the compact bathroom with a shower. Despite its size, the bathroom boasted ample amenities. After showering and shaving, I headed downstairs before the others had stirred, opting to explore the surroundings while the house was still quiet. Moving from the main room to a patio featuring a fire pit and built-in outdoor BBQ, I then ventured onto a raised terrace housing a small pool and sauna. Considering the chilly spring climate of these mountains, an open water feature seemed risky, but as I stepped onto the terrace, I discovered the entire area was heated. Solar panels adorned the higher slopes of the mountain, heating both the pool and likely the house. Crossing the terrace, I reached what appeared to be a small barn, devoid of animals but stocked with ATVs, snowmobiles, and gardening tools, including several small tractors. As I passed by, the distant sound of a babbling stream caught my attention. About 20 yards behind a locked barn with a chimney protruding from its roof, I glimpsed through a small window, spotting a generator and fuel tanks. It was evident that meticulous care was taken to ensure the provision of gasoline for recreational vehicles and emergency power through the generator. This location felt like its own secluded universe, evidently prepared for any conceivable scenario. Despite the stream appearing small and shallow, I reconsidered its size when witnessing a fish leap from its waters. "Are you fishing?" came a voice from behind me. Turning, I found Paula standing there. "Not today, but I used to when I had more free time. Seems like this weekend might offer you that chance." "Are you into fishing?" I inquired. "No, like you, I lack the time." "Perhaps we could have breakfast and then take a hike up the mountain. It'd be a shame to come all this way and not reach the summit," she suggested. Paula prepared coffee in the stainless steel maker while the kitchen pantry held microwave-ready breakfast options. Opting for instant oatmeal, I noticed none of the others had yet stirred. They'd likely sleep in. "How about that hike?" she proposed, smiling. With Paula evidently knowing the trail's beginning, she led us straight to it. Initially, the summit didn't seem too far, but an hour later, it felt as distant as when we began. "Are you sure about reaching the top?" I questioned. "Why quit now, old man?" she teased. "I'm just thinking about what the others will say when they find us missing." "Don't worry, I doubt they'll mind." Finally reaching the summit, the sun positioned nearly overhead indicated noon was nearing. The mountain's peak was somewhat underwhelming, with a flat area bordered by rounded edges. 2 weathered wooden benches faced east, offering views of the gatehouse and several distant peaks to the south and east. Though the fog obscured distant vistas, the air felt crisp and pure. Seating herself, Paula appeared content to soak in the view. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "I'd like to rest before heading back down." "No, the old man could use a rest," I responded, prompting a smile from me. "So Glenn is a broker, Ken is a banker, and Gabe is a developer. But despite talking all night, I never found out what you do," I remarked, eyeing her thoughtfully. She seemed to weigh the question, assessing the potential consequences. "I'm an inspector. I work for the government. It's a low-paying and rather dull job," she divulged. "Have you inspected anyone we know?" I inquired. "Not recently. Back in college, it felt like I was always bailing them out, covering for them with angry girlfriends or providing cheat sheets for exams. They were always on the edge. That's what makes them who they are. Extraordinary young people," she explained. "So, is this your job now? Covering for them? What's the point of closing the barn door after the horse is bolted? It won't help you retrieve your horse. Rules just hold things back. It's better if smart people rise to the top and the rest step aside. Ultimately, everyone benefits according to their own merits," I mused. "What about your role this weekend? You didn't attend the party last night," I pointed out. She fell silent, caught off guard by the question. I rose and moved to where I could see the road leading down the mountain. There was only one way out. The way out. Turning back to Paula, I scrutinized her. Had she considered this? The others, I realized in a moment of insight, were entirely oblivious to anything beyond their own physical desires. But was she? Clearly, she was observant. She must see the issue as I did. "I'm just here as the designated sober one. I ensure everything runs smoothly, intervening only if absolutely necessary," she explained. "Meaning, unless the Golden Boys need you," I summarized. "I wouldn't put it like that, but I certainly prioritize what's best for them, for everyone, in the long run," she clarified. "Shall we head downstairs?" I suggested. "What's the rush? The journey back will be quicker," she remarked. "Yes, quicker, but the slope is steep and perhaps more perilous. You could take a nasty fall," I cautioned. "Why worry when you're already at the top?" she retorted, though she rose and began to descend. We returned to the lodge without incident, yet my concerns intensified. Finding the others by the pool, I was taken aback by my wife's appearance in a black bikini, revealing her body in a manner I hadn't seen before. The other women were similarly clad. As Paula and I approached, I witnessed my wife seated on Gabe's lap, engaged in a passionate kiss. "We're back!" Paula's shout interrupted Gabe and Gloria's kiss. Gabe grinned mischievously while Gloria's smile seemed forced. "Where have you two been?" Gloria asked casually, breaking the awkward silence. My fists clenched instinctively, but Paula squeezed my hand. "Well, since we missed lunch and conquered the mountain, we deserve some food," Paula declared, pulling me towards the cabin. As we left the pool area, I heard muted laughter. I wasn't sure what Paula had prepared, and if I ate anything, I couldn't recall. She handed me a glass of straight black Johnny Walker, which burned as it went down. "Think before you act," she advised. "It's just one weekend in a good marriage, and you need to consider your family." Returning to the pool, the couples were already settled in the jacuzzi, laughing and giggling. My wife remained seated on Gabe's lap. I couldn't see their hands underwater, but I assumed they were occupied. A joint was passed around, and it was evident that everyone was intoxicated. Paula positioned herself where she could keep an eye on things, placing herself between the jacuzzi and me. I pretended to drink more before discreetly walking away. Out of sight, I poured out the contents of my glass. It was a strange mix of jealousy and pride. I was proud of my wife's transformation from the chubby girl I married to the beautiful, athletic woman she had become, rightfully desired by others. I took pride in the fact that men longed to be in her loving, strong arms. But what about her inner self as she sculpted her physique? Seeing her with Gabe had an oddly alluring quality. I could picture their flawless bodies entwined physically, a nightmarish yet exhilarating image. I strolled around the lodge grounds, observing its operations, passing time while dreading the direction things seemed to be heading, realizing that ultimately, I might need to take control of my options. Entering our bedroom, I made a deliberate attempt to sleep. As I lay there, trying to quiet my mind, the question of why my wife was flirting and kissing another man lingered. We had weathered many hardships together, from our early struggles with poverty to our children's illnesses and the constant financial strain of living on a middle-class income. We were finally starting to climb towards stability. Our children had reached an age of independence, my wife had a modest but steady career, and I was earning a good income after years of financial struggle. Our debts were manageable and our future looked promising. So why risk it all for someone as shallow and empty as Gabe Zillow? Behind his charm and boldness, there was nothing substantial. Strip away the flashy exterior and there was emptiness. Gabe had never designed a site plan, built or sold a home. He was the figurehead of a business run by others, a wealthy individual with no real substance, a prodigy whose only asset was his image. What was Gloria thinking? She claimed she just wanted to have fun this weekend. Was this her idea of fun? And how would it end? I must have fallen asleep because when I descended the stairs, they had already gathered in the main room. Lunch had passed, but the drinks were still flowing and joints were being passed around. Gloria was back in Gabe's lap, and there was no denying they had kissed. The women had removed their bikini tops, including Paula, who seemed to be sharing Ken with Robin. I headed straight for the kitchen to heat up dinner in the microwave when Gloria walked in. "How are you?" she asked. "It could have been better," I replied. There was a moment of hesitation before she spoke again. "I spent the evening with Gabe," she confessed. "I noticed," I said as the microwave beeped. She gave a strange smile when I turned to attend to the microwave. "No, I mean tonight, in his room." I remained very still, facing away from her, not wanting her to see the pain she was causing. "I see. But what about our 16 years of marriage?" I questioned. "That's why I can do this. It's only for the weekend. Next week I'll be all yours again," she assured. "And Gabe won't mind?" I retorted. She hugged me from behind, burying her head against my back. "Gabe likes you. He thinks you two are going somewhere. It's just a fling. A little fun for the weekend, okay?" she asked, her words punctuated by hugs. "Can I choose?" I inquired. "Not really. It's decided. I'm just letting you know," she replied. She released me and I heard her leave the kitchen. I walked to where the kitchen opened into the main room. They were already heading up the stairs. Gabe glanced back, smiling and giving me a thumbs up as if we were on the same page. He whispered something to Gloria, who turned around, waved, and smiled at me. I returned to the kitchen, feeling as though everything we had been through together meant nothing. My wife had left me and humiliated me. I discarded the food from the microwave and made coffee instead. It was going to be a long night. As the water started to boil, I heard footsteps entering the kitchen. I turned to find Paula observing me. "I didn't expect there to be caffeine. Wouldn't something else be better?" she queried. "Everyone has their preferences," I replied. "But tell me, what's your role here?" She shrugged in response. "I'm just trying to ensure things remain calm." "And how do you plan to do that? By sleeping with me?" She chuckled. "No, I wouldn't go that far, but don't lose hope. You'll have your wife back, and maybe even a bonus." "So, there's money involved," I noted. "Isn't it always the case? You can't make waves when you work for this man. You have to consider your family. What choice do you have but to accept what's offered? This is their world, not yours. That's just how it goes." A sharp moan of pleasure echoed from above. "Seems like she's having a good time," Paula grinned. "Well, good for her. A delightful weekend for everyone in the mountains. You know, these rocks have stood here for ages. Our existence is merely a fleeting moment for them. Thousands of years ago, they were buried under layers of ice that carved through them, forming the rivers and gorges we now navigate to make our world livable. Sometimes we forget how fragile our existence is. Remove one small piece and our world crumbles. Only then do we realize it's all an illusion." Paula laughed. "Wow, you're quite the philosopher." "No, just someone who understands what truly matters, striving to discern the genuine from the fleeting illusions." She probably assumed I wouldn't stir up any trouble, leaving me alone with my coffee and my anguish. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I ascended the stairs. Passing the master bedroom door, I was greeted by loud screams and pleasure-filled moans from my wife. She had always been quiet during our carnal moments, but it seemed he brought her more satisfaction. Younger and more vigorous, he excelled in every aspect. It appeared my wife had found the pleasure she sought in his embrace. I showered and changed into warm attire, anticipating the cold outside. I tried to drown out the noises echoing through the walls as I waited. By the time silence finally descended upon the house, it was well past 3 o'clock in the morning. Waiting another 30 minutes, I ventured downstairs. In a kitchen cabinet, I discovered a flashlight and candles with matches. A prudent measure, I reasoned, in case reality severed our connection to electricity. The night enveloped the surroundings in a profound darkness, with the moon having already set. The nocturnal symphony of the mountains, though, felt like silence to someone accustomed to city life. I easily located a barn and a 20-gallon plastic canister filled with motorsports gas. A wrench lay nearby. Though a padlock secured the generator shed door, the hinge mechanism had succumbed to rust. The wrench swiftly liberated it. The house's owners had thoughtfully provided a manual gasoline pump, enabling me to swiftly fill the canister. In less than 10 minutes, I navigated around the lodge to reach my rented SUV's parking spot. I loaded a gas can into the back, released the handbrake, and shifted the transmission into drive. Allowing the car to roll downhill, I started it up and drove off cautiously as I neared the bridge. Carefully navigating it, I halted upon reaching the gravel road. Taking my time, I ensured the gasoline seeped into the bridge's wood. It was a meticulously crafted structure, a testament to skilled artisans who took pride in their work. Regular folks had built this bridge to facilitate the leisure of those who profited off the toil of others. But the fun was about to come to an abrupt end. Dropping the match, it sputtered before igniting. Flames swiftly erupted, and I quickly retreated as a fierce explosion of heat and fire ensued. The wooden bridge crackled and collapsed into the inferno, its blaze likely visible for miles around. Turning back to my car, I drove away leisurely. There was no need to hurry. Anyone who witnessed the fire was now stranded on the other side. I was confident I'd be long gone before they realized their predicament. By the time dawn broke, I was already stopping at a gas station off the highway. Filling up the SUV, I left the empty canister at the pumps, certain someone would eventually collect it. Any link between the fire and me would vanish. Returning the SUV around 9 a.m., I retrieved my car. After showering and dressing casually for the office, I had 2 final tasks to sever ties with Countryman Real Estate. Bernie, though a good boss, was forgetful, often leaving items in his office. With keys to every door and filing cabinet, I had easy access. Gabe, meticulous with his belongings, kept the combination to his desk safe, in a folder labeled Security, stored in a locked closet. Thanks to Bernie's keys, I gained entry and retrieved the password diary from the safe, accessing the company's personal account. It would have been simple to abscond with everything, but that wasn't my intent. Theft would only lead to trouble. Instead, I transferred the operating account to another. Initially, when I joined Countryman, we established a trust account for deposits, as per state regulations. Over time, new trust accounts were created for each project, while the original was forgotten. Although the previous account was archived, it wasn't recorded in the ledgers. It remained empty until I injected nearly $20 million into it. Safeguarding all our cash, I bolstered our line of credit as a precaution, ensuring my actions didn't seem hollow. Nothing was stolen, everything remained intact. However, it would take days to locate and return the funds. In the wee hours of Tuesday morning, electronic transfers will hit an empty account, halting hundreds of payments. Unsure of the extent of damage, our reliance on credit left us vulnerable. Remove that lifeline, and we'll face tough times, at least temporarily. It'll be an uphill battle for Countrymen to rebuild their creditworthiness. The longer the shortfall persists, the more dire the situation becomes. With luck, Gabe will still be away in the mountains. On Tuesday, once all is set, I'll print my resignation letter before departing the office. As I was about to leave, placing the letter on Gabe's secretary's desk, my cell buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I saw Gloria's photo, but I let it go to voicemail, though I couldn't resist listening.
"Where are you, baby? The car's missing and I'm worried sick. Call me,"
her voice pleaded. About 30 minutes later, Gabe called.
"Hey, Lyle, you okay? Gloria's frantic. Call her," he urged, with a hint of threat at the end.
Oddly, it amused me. On Sunday, Gloria called 3 times, with 2 more calls from Gabe, the latter sounding more forceful, insisting I get in touch. Monday morning, I fetched the kids from Gloria's parents. As I left, Gloria called again,
Be home tonight. We need to talk. If you get this call, I'm really worried, she implored.
This is childish, she added. I doubted she'd return. At her parents', they were expecting me. Gloria called again, saying, "You might be on your own picking up the kids." Her mother urged me to call, while her father suggested waiting until she returned. "There are things we need to sort out," he remarked. Personally, I aimed to steer clear of familial debates. They weren't pleased, but there wasn't much they could do. My daughter sensed tension, but I assured her, "This is between Mom and me. We'll discuss it when she returns, out of fairness to her." After settling the kids in, I retreated to our old bedroom and dialed Felix Rodriguez. "How's it going, Lyle?" he greeted. "Not great." "Felix, I need your expertise," I confided. Felix, a top-notch family lawyer and stand-up guy, listened attentively. "What's going on?" he inquired. "I need to file for divorce," I stated firmly. We delved into details over an hour, scheduling an appointment for late Tuesday to kickstart the process. Meanwhile, calls persisted from the mountains. It seems her parents got in touch with her. The tone of the messages changed. Gloria and Gabe reached out without threats. "Hey, if I messed up, I apologize. Let's not let this weekend affect our professional relationship. It wouldn't be good for anyone if you catch my drift," Gabe stated. Later, around 5 p.m., Gloria reached out urgently. "Lyle, please call. Something's happened here. There's no bridge. We're all stuck. Call me. I need to talk," she urged. Bright and early Tuesday, I rang up Stephen Pender, my old buddy. We arranged to meet for lunch at a nearby diner. "Are you sure about this?" Stephen mused between bites. "Done deal. I've officially resigned," I affirmed. As if to emphasize, Donna, my former secretary at Countryman, called. "Lyle, they're saying you've resigned, but you've got to come in. Everything's going haywire." "Something's seriously off," Donna relayed. "Sorry, I can't. I'm no longer with the company. You should ring up Gabe. They say he's stranded in the mountains. Something about a bridge, huh? Tough break. Don't worry, though. It'll all work out. Anything else I should know?" Steve inquired. "Nope, not my concern anymore," I replied. "Well, if you're sure, I think I can up my last offer by $10,000 a year. Can you start tomorrow?" "Isn't that too soon?" "Nope, perfect," Steve confirmed. Wednesday morning, I joined Pandare and Partners. Just settling in that afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. "Where's my money?" "You're an idiot," Gabe Zello stormed in. "What money are you talking about?" "You know, operating funds." "Sorry, you might want to chat with the company accountants." "If I do that, I'll sue you for embezzlement," he threatened. I just smirked. He found his way down that mountain. "But where are the operational funds? You think you're some hotshot lawyer, but you're just an idiot who can't satisfy his wife. She really enjoyed her time with me, and I'll keep her happy whenever I feel like it." He spat, then stormed off. The next day, the police called me to the station for questioning. "Sorry, I've just started a new job. My time's tight, but I can respond to your questions in writing and call you back," I offered. The officer tried to explain they don't usually do that, but I insisted, citing my profession. After some back and forth, he hung up. I anticipated the police would need to investigate the embezzlement claim, tracing the money. They'd find it in the company account where I deposited it days ago. I figured that'd be the end of it. A civil matter at most, and an unsuccessful one. I was mistaken. It took them a fortnight to track down the missing funds. By then, Countryman was in dire straits. Its credit had been completely cut off by the banks, necessitating an infusion of new capital to reopen it. Gloria arrived late Friday evening with both our trip suitcases. Her key no longer worked due to my changing the locks. I met her at the door. "Please, Lyle, let me in." "Think about the children if not for me," she pleaded. "No, you don't live here anymore. I parked your car on the street. I assume you still have the keys," I replied. "Do you hate me that much?" "Yes," I affirmed, closing the door. I decided she would go to her parents. I instructed Felix to serve her with a restraining order and file for divorce. The brief reprieve the bridge provided paid off handsomely. With Felix's help, she was kept away, and I gained temporary custody of the children. It took her 2 months and likely every penny she had to get back on her feet. By then, the divorce proceedings were well underway, needing only finalization. Gabe Zillow wasn't as fortunate. Countryman Real Estate had to shut down, ceasing operations right after Labor Day. The following week, I had an unexpected visitor. He sat in the visitor's chair upon my return from closing the third deal. With a deep tan and looking healthy, he was lightly dressed for the northern autumn. "Bernie, how's it going?" I greeted. "I'm doing all right," he replied, scanning my modest office. "What brings you to the cold north?" I inquired, sensing this was no casual visit. Well, here's the thing. Florida's swarming with sharks, and most of them aren't in the water. I figured I'd stick to what I know, he explained. I'm glad to see you back, I said, uncertain of his intentions. Bernie read my expression. I took a hit down there, starting over, but it seems I got lucky. This company I own seems affordable, he revealed, a smile appearing. We exchanged knowing smiles. So what's on your mind, old pirate? I asked. Well, here's the deal. I need a partner. At my age, bankers doubt any venture I start will last, and, well, you and I make a good team. What do you say? He proposed. I have very little money. You've probably heard about my impending divorce, I mentioned. Yes, I have, he acknowledged, hinting at the spreading gossip. Let's go with 10%, he offered. 50? Let's be reasonable. You said you're strapped for cash, but I'll settle for 45%, I countered. Look, 25% is fair, but it's not enough. How about 40% and an option to buy another 10% in 10 years, he negotiated. All right, let's hope I live to see it, I quipped, knowing he'd likely outlast me. Bernie and I were back in business. We acquired every lot owned by Countrymen at a discount using the same bank's funds. I anticipated challenges, but our business quickly thrived, constructing and selling homes. Life progressed as usual, as did my divorce proceedings. It largely centered on custody and visitation. Ultimately, we devised a complex joint custody and visitation arrangement. That's why I returned to a dark, empty house on Christmas Eve. Gloria had taken the children for Christmas, though I was supposed to have them. Given that Christmas fell on a Sunday, they had to return to her on Monday, her day off. The kids struggled with this routine. Approaching the house, I spotted a figure on the steps, sheltered from the cold and the light snowfall. I was beside her before recognizing my ex-wife. Gloria, what are you doing here? I inquired. She didn't seem well. Thinner than before, her eyes appeared vacant and indifferent. It was evident she had recently cried. I want to go home, she whimpered. Where are the children? I asked, sidestepping her request. With my parents. They want to come home too. We want to be a family again in our little house. What you did to us is unfair. I didn't do anything like that. Well, yes, that's true. I made a mistake, okay? It was a bad and hurtful mistake, but it was just one mistake. You're the one who tore our family apart, she accused, her voice tinged with anger. Making a conscious effort to regain composure, she said, I promised myself I wouldn't lose my temper, but you need to understand, I struggle with anger because of this. You have anger issues? I was surprised. Don't act innocent, that's not who you are. Were you just ahead of the game? I'm not naive, Lyle. You were never a saint. I know I hurt you, but it was never intentional. Do you honestly expect me to believe that sleeping with another man right in front of me wouldn't hurt? I replied. She turned away, clearly wounded by my words. I watched as she wiped her eyes, her back now facing me. It was evident she was crying. I was always the overweight one, the last choice on the dance floor. I had to settle for whoever showed interest. I was a good girl, enduring countless insults. I waited all through high school and most of college for the right person. When I met you, I thought I had found him. I was a maid when we got married. I didn't make a fuss about it, but I assumed you knew. You weren't a prince then, and you certainly aren't now. You were just an ordinary guy, but I loved you with all my heart. Yes, you were a bit sharper and more ambitious than the rest, but we were always struggling financially. I learned to adjust my expectations because of my love for you. It pained me to witness your constant struggles. Then Gabriel entered the picture, and suddenly everything seemed to improve. He possessed all the qualities a woman desires in a man. This time the prince had his eyes on me. It was incredibly flattering. After the Christmas party, he kept reaching out to me. It wasn't serious, just harmless flirting. You know, attractive women often receive attention like that. I've been approached before, but never by someone from the beautiful and powerful elite. He spoke highly of you and expressed how fortunate I am to have such an amazing boyfriend like you. I bet he was just enamored with me, I remarked. Exactly. He mentioned how hard you work and how he wants to reward you. I understood his implications. If I played nice with him, he would take care of you. I suppose I let him convince me that you would benefit if I gave in to him. And it's true. There was a part of me that desired him. It felt like there was this irrational urge guiding me toward him. I was torn between hoping something would happen over the weekend and fearing it. But once we arrived, my resistance began to fade. I turned to you and confessed. What? Are you serious? You told me you were considering sleeping with him. Okay. I didn't say it outright. But you knew what was going on and you didn't object, she said, turning to me.
Tears streamed down her cheeks, dripping from her chin, and her nose was running. I trusted you. We've spent 16 years together. How could you betray me like this? I lamented. But that's the crux of it. We loved each other. It was merely a fleeting affair. It pales in comparison to what we shared before and what lies ahead. Are you so deluded to think that, after hearing your cries of pleasure for him, we can salvage anything meaningful? Oh, for heaven's sake, you can't be that naive. It was all a facade. I aimed to please him. I put on quite a performance. Individuals like him demand and anticipate such theatrics. That's not how I behave in bed. And after 16 years of closeness with me, you should know that. All I know is what you did, how you degraded me. You chose the golden boy over me, the cad who offers nothing and takes everything. Powerful, isn't it? So, where is he now? What happened when the crisis hit? I'll tell you everything. He folded under pressure. We live in a society that perpetuates the dominance of the few over the many, based on the myth of some hidden brilliance they possess. Explain to me, how did this genius manage to descend the mountain so swiftly? He called for a helicopter. By then, he suspected that you had tampered with the business. It was glaringly obvious that you had sabotaged the bridge. He thought you embezzled his funds. The others began to panic. Paula insisted that this couldn't be true, that it couldn't happen like that. When the helicopter arrived, there was only space for Gabe. The rest resigned. I believe the National Guard eventually erected a temporary bridge to rescue us. Sharon and I reconciled. By then, her husband had already discovered the truth. She faced consequences just like me. Poor Robin's fiancé called off the engagement. Glenn and Ken encountered trouble, but I think they managed to resolve it with Paula's assistance. It seems it was only Gabe and us, regular folks, who truly bore the brunt of it all. But wasn't the pain sufficient? She asked, peering at me with hope. Gloria's words held a lot of truth. I wasn't entirely blameless. I toiled for Gabe, yet unlike the rest of the world, I never aligned myself with him. I knew the truth, but refused to acknowledge it to myself. I can't overlook how it transpired. They were nothing but empty promises. If scrutinized closely, one could discern a trap. But no one looked. Illusion proved more enticing than reality. We weathered through tough times, and they passed with time. What you and Gabe stripped from me was the sanctuary of my home. I'll never regain it, because those scoundrels demonstrated that what I believed in was a mirage. You and I were an illusion. With that said, I rose and made for the door of the dim, vacant house. She persisted. Answer me this, she implored. Would you prefer solitude without me, or would you rather be with me and our children around the Christmas tree tonight? I gazed at her. It would be effortless to embrace her, cherish her, bring the children back to sleep in their own beds on Christmas Eve, and pretend that what occurred never did. But all I could muster was, that's a valid question. But I lack an answer. With those words, we turned away from each other. The past cannot be altered. We must forge ahead for our future. Sitting at my desk, I reminisced about the 30 years since our wedding, recalling our honeymoon and the fondest memories of my life. Reflecting on our cherished time in Hawaii with Maggie fills me with deep nostalgia and gratitude. It was an extraordinary, magical experience that will always hold a special place in my heart. From the start, it felt like we had stepped into an enchanted realm, washing away all worldly concerns and leaving a serene tranquility. Walking hand in hand along Waikiki's pristine beaches with gentle waves kissing our feet, we were captivated by the beauty around us. The fragrant scent of plumeria lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the romance and peace that surrounded us. Our honeymoon wasn't just about the breathtaking landscapes, it was the shared experiences that etched themselves into our souls. Exploring lush rainforests and discovering hidden waterfalls revealed the majesty of nature. Standing together, we marveled at the raw power and beauty around us. Our clifftop villa in Maui offered endless panoramic views. Every sunset was a masterpiece, painting the sky in vibrant hues. In those precious moments, as we held each other close, our hearts overflowed with love and devotion. The nights were filled with romance, starting with candlelit dinners on the beach under a canopy of stars, savoring fresh seafood and island delicacies. But it was Maggie's tender gaze that truly made those evenings magical.
Hawaii wasn't just a destination. It became the embodiment of our love story, filled with cherished memories and shared dreams. Thinking back on our honeymoon, I relived the beauty and depth of our connection. Hawaii fueled our love, strengthening our bond and bringing us unparalleled joy and peace. I'm sincerely grateful for the precious memories we created in that romantic oasis. Lost in thought, my secretary interrupted, noticing my good mood. She jokingly asked if I'd won the lottery. I explained that my wife had been especially attentive lately, making me feel appreciated and loved after years. It felt like a second honeymoon, and for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to be with her and couldn't stop thinking about her. For the past 2 weeks, I've called Maggie several times a day just to hear her voice, feeling like a lovesick teenager. But I didn't mind. I was happy again, and I didn't want it to end. Maggie and I share a sturdy marriage, yet over 30 years, the spark can dwindle into routine. However, these past 2 weeks have been different. Maggie's been playful, eager for closeness almost every night, and reviving past gestures. I never doubted this surge in affection as anything but a rejuvenation of our bond. Excitedly, I left work early, planning a romantic surprise for her. I bought 24 roses, penned a heartfelt note, picked up her favorite wine and a box of chocolate-covered cherries. Tonight, along with professing my love, I'll unveil the 7-night cruise I booked in celebration of our love. With a grin, I returned home through the garage, brimming with anticipation. Climbing the kitchen steps, instead of finding my beloved wife Maggie, I discovered our daughter Brandy, 29, at the table. Greeting her with a kiss on the forehead, I asked, "Hey there, where's Mom?" Just 2 weeks ago, they had a significant conversation.
"Brandy, I'm not sure about this," Maggie confessed. "I love your dad very much, and I'm afraid that if I go through this, I'll hurt him." "Mom, Dad loves you and he will understand," Brandy reassured. "You yourself said that you need something more than what you received before, and Dad is not getting any younger. I know that he will understand your needs and allow you to have this one-time pleasure." "Brandy, there's no way I can stand in front of your father and tell him I'm on a date with another man. I just can't do it," Maggie insisted. "Then let me do it," Brandy offered. "Alexander will be waiting for you at the restaurant at 7 in the evening, and you will be ready to leave by 6 in the evening when Dad gets home. I'll be here and explain everything to him, and you'll get the experience you crave." "Honey." "Yes, I agreed to this date, but I have doubts. This is wrong and I shouldn't go. How will I be able to look your father in the eye for the next 2 weeks knowing that I agreed to go on a date with another man?" Maggie expressed her concerns. "Well, I can suggest that you don't tell him anything, but during these 2 weeks, show him how much you love him. Let him know that he has nothing to worry about. And when I explain everything, he will understand that what you are doing is not about love, but only about new friendships and a little fun lovemaking. Reach out to him and rock his world. And when I explain the situation that evening, he will welcome you back with open arms. Believe me, Dad loves you and is ready to do anything for you. He always gave you what you wanted, just like that," Brandy advised. "Showing his love for you, Mom. Probably yes. And maybe you're right. Well, I mean, it's just one date and it doesn't mean I'm leaving your father for another man. Having a fun night out 30 years later shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to show your dad how wonderful he is and how much I love him every night until date night. And then, when I get back to him, I'm going to try to make him the happiest man in the world," Maggie resolved. "Mom, just make him feel loved and appreciated. He is a great guy and will give you this one-of-a-kind experience. Now I have to get home to cook dinner for Mike." "Thanks, baby, and say hi to Mike. When will you two give us grandchildren?" Brandy asked. "Soon. We've already talked and plan to start working on it in a few months," Brandy replied. Before heading home, Maggie sat alone in the art studio Jason had built for her behind their house, in front of his latest project. Lately, she had been having difficulty being creative because the thought of being with another man weighed heavily on her. Guilt blocked her creativity until Maggie remembered Brandy's words, and suddenly her brushes came to life, covering the canvas with vibrant colors and emotional landscapes. Suddenly, she felt confident that she was doing the right thing for herself and that her husband would give her this experience. She found herself talking to herself as she sat alone, feeling peace overcome her guilt. "Jason may be angry at first, but I know I can make him understand. I truly love this man, and he was such a wonderful husband and father. I will be the best wife and show him how much I love him." On the initial night of my love-boosting plan, I slipped into his favorite baby doll nightgown post-shower, fixed my hair, and spent time on my makeup. Meeting Jason at the door in the nightgown and heels, I whisked him to the bedroom, undressing him and surprising him with a long-forgotten pleasure below the belt, eagerly. His smile filled me with warmth, and I pondered why I hadn't done this sooner. His embrace and words of love sealed the moment. "Maggie, that was the best homecoming in ages. What prompted it?" Jason inquired. "I just wanted to show you how special you are and how much I love you." "Did you enjoy it?" I asked. "I did. It's been too long. I forgot how much I missed it." "I felt content," he replied, pulling me onto the bed for passionate kisses. It was the best closeness we'd had in years, leading me to reconsider my date plans with Alexander. Over the ensuing weeks, our closeness soared, and Jason transformed. He was more joyful, affectionate, and engaging, reigniting our bond. I found myself happier than I'd been in ages and reconsidered my date night plans, even confiding in Brandy about the change. Maybe I didn't need that experience anymore as Dad and I found our spark again. "This is wonderful, Mom, but hold off on canceling just yet. Let's see how the next 2 weeks unfold. Enjoy each other and reevaluate later. You can always cancel last minute and Alexander will understand. But remember, this opportunity might not come again," Brandy advised. "Okay, maybe you're right. Tell me more about Alexander. I recall he's your friend's father, but refresh my memory about his situation," I requested. "Sure, Mom. When his wife Mary was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, Alexander dedicated himself to her until her passing. He became a recluse afterward, battling depression and loneliness. He struggled with the idea of dating again, feeling lost without Mary," Brandy explained. "As I listened to his story, I realized I might have a solution for both of you," Brandy continued. "I told him about your enduring love for Dad and your desire to rejuvenate your relationship. We discussed the idea of a date not for a long-term romance, but to explore friendship and perhaps more, without abandoning Dad." When he laid eyes on your photo, his face lit up. He grinned and questioned, "Do I really have a chance to take her out?" "Here's our chat, Mr. Connor. I promise, once I show Mom your picture and tell her about you, she won't pass up this opportunity." "But she's a bit older than you." "Will that be an issue?" "Not at all. As long as she looks the same. I'd love to spend time with her." "What about your dad? Will he be okay with her dating me? After all, she's his wife." "Like I said, leave it to me. Dad will do anything to make Mom happy, and she needs it just as much as you do. I think you two can support each other and become good friends. Trust me, I'll handle everything. I'll talk to her, and if she's on board, I'll give you her number. Then you can plan a date and spend the night together." "Night? What do you mean?" "Mr. Connor, you're both adults. You both crave companionship. Get creative and plan an evening and night together. So he finds you attractive and wants to spend the night with you. If you're interested, I'll give him your cell number and tell him to call you during the day. He seems really nice, and he's about 10 years younger than you. I know you'll be happy. He just needs someone to talk to and be friends with. And I believe you two can help each other." The following day, Alexander phoned Maggie, and after a delightful chat, he asked her to be his companion and spend the night with him. His compliments about her photo and the prospect of a date made her feel giddy like a schoolgirl. The thrill of something new and his playful banter gave her butterflies. She accepted the date eagerly, expressing her anticipation. While he offered to pick her up, she preferred to meet at the restaurant. They exchanged texts daily, their flirtation escalating as their date night drew near. On the eve of their rendezvous, Maggie's texts would have failed any fidelity test. She was consumed with excitement, envisioning the evening ahead. Despite her thoughts of Jason, she poured more energy into their lovemaking every night.
Jason sported a perpetual grin, while Maggie harbored an insatiable craving for closeness, reaching a level of fulfillment exceeding her wildest dreams. I cherished my daughter, viewing her as the epitome of beauty. Proud of her evolution into the woman she is today, I lamented not spending more time with her during her formative years. Nevertheless, I toiled to provide them with a good life and endeavored to be there for her as much as possible. Upon spotting her, I greeted her with a smile tinged with embarrassment. "Darling, what brings you here? And where's your mother?" I inquired, placing 24 roses, a bottle of wine, and a box of chocolates on the table. "I have a special surprise for your mom tonight, and I can't wait to see her reaction." Reaching into my jacket pocket, I retrieved travel plans and tickets for a week-long cruise. "I'm whisking your mom away on a 7-day cruise aboard the new yacht, love. I'm eager to witness her joy when she learns about it. Don't breathe a word when she arrives. I want it to be a surprise." "Dad." Her use of daddy always tugged at my heartstrings, evoking memories of her as a little girl nestled on my lap. But I sensed something amiss as tears welled in her eyes, and she struggled to catch her breath, clearly anxious about what I was about to hear. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, a tear slipping from her eye. Witnessing the concern on my face, I inquired, "What's wrong? Is something the matter with Mom?" "No, Mom's okay. Please, just sit down and I'll explain everything," she urged. I settled in, meeting her tearful gaze as she struggled to continue. After a pause, she began, "Dad, you know how much Mom loves you, and she's mentioned how great things have been between you two lately." "Yes, and I love her too. That's why I want to express my feelings for her now." Seeing her tears, I sensed that her words weren't unfolding as planned. "I'm really sorry, Daddy, but Mom has a date." I sat in silence, comprehending the words, but grappling with their significance. Her tears flowed as my mind connected the dots, stirring anger within me. "Brandy, what do you mean?" "Where's your mother?" I demanded, my voice booming, causing her to recoil in fear. "Mom loves you deeply, Daddy. And you might take this the wrong way, but she went on a date with someone else and won't be home until tomorrow. She couldn't bring herself to tell you, so I volunteered because she didn't want to hurt you. It's just one night and she'll be back tomorrow." "What's this, a joke? You can't be serious." "Your mother would never betray me like this. We were so loving and close." "I can't believe it," I exclaimed. "Dad, she loves you. She just needed to try something new. After 30 years of marriage, she felt restless and wanted more in life, just once. Nothing will change between you except that she'll love you even more for understanding," my daughter reasoned. Studying her closely, I asked, "Brandy, why are you involved in this? Your mother shouldn't have brought you into it, and I should be discussing this with her, not you. How did she rope you into this?" "Dad, you know Mom and I have always been close. We share everything. She confided that things had slowed down between you two in the bedroom and she felt neglected. My friend's father lost his wife years ago. He was depressed and needed companionship, so I introduced them," she explained. I abruptly stood, knocking over a chair. "What, are you serious? You set your mother up on a date with your friend's father?" I demanded, pacing the kitchen in disbelief. "Damn it, Brandy! Answer me!" I yelled, towering over her. "Did you arrange this? My wife, your mother, is on a date with your friend's father because of you?" Anger surged through me, spittle flying from my mouth. "I'm really sorry, Daddy, but yes, it sounds bad when you put it that way, but I did it out of love for my friend's parents," she explained. "Holy hell, what have you done? Love for your friend's parents? What about your love for me? Am I just some piece of trash you can disrespect and expect me to accept whatever you come up with? Where is she now? And what did you mean when you said she won't be home until tomorrow?" I demanded. "Dad, he took her to a restaurant. I don't know which one, and then they'll spend the night together, but it's only this once. She'll be back tomorrow. And Daddy, she loves only you. All she's been telling me for the past 2 weeks is how much she loves you and doesn't want you to be hurt. It's just one date and one night. She knew you would understand and give her this one chance." "Is that all? So foolishly, I've believed her recent affection was fueled by love. But now you're telling me it was just to assuage her guilt. Well, this won't end well, I assure you," I retorted, still in disbelief. Tears streaming down her face, she pleaded, "Dad, it's not like that at all. She never pretended or hurt you. On the contrary, she did everything possible to show you her love." "Daddy, can't you just give her this one night? You know she loves you and can't imagine life without you. She told me she looks forward to your retirement and spending time with your grandchildren. Mike and I plan to have kids, and we need both of you." Well, isn't that incredibly unusual? That ship sailed the moment she agreed to go on a date with someone other than me. "Who is this guy?" I asked. "He's my friend Mary's dad. He's really nice, and I think you'll like him." "Daddy, I believe you two have a lot in common," she replied. "Oh, really? We could be great pals. So you think I could befriend a man who knowingly dates a married woman? My wife. Maybe we can become drinking buddies, and I can offer him your mom on the weekends. Is that what you and your mom have in mind for me? I retorted sarcastically. Brandy sank into her chair, realizing a serious flaw in her plan. She had never seen me so angry, or heard me speak to her like that. A shiver ran down her spine as she recoiled from my anger. After pacing around the room, I finally regained control of my emotions and turned to my daughter. Speaking with a venomous tone she didn't want to hear anymore. My hurt and pain were evident, making her feel small and guilty for her role in the situation. Listen carefully, Brandy. I want you to leave now. I need to be alone to process what you two did to me tonight. I don't want to see or hear from you. Don't call me. Don't write. Ever. Your betrayal is unforgivable. And now I have no daughter. You are dead to me. Do you understand what this means? I'm no longer your father, and I don't have a daughter. Now get out of my house and never speak to me again, I declared sternly. Brandy sobbed openly, her head in her hands. Dad, please don't say that. I love you, and I want to stay here tonight. Mom and I planned for me to stay with you. We don't want you to be alone. The level of disrespect you've shown me makes me question if you ever respected or loved me as your father. You're your mother's daughter. All these years, I worked tirelessly to provide you and your mother with a better life, and this is the gratitude I get. No. It turns out I'm only here as a meal ticket, and I've obviously never earned any respect from either of you, I concluded bitterly. Between tears and sobs, she uttered, Dad, I love you. Please, refrain from saying that. Leave it to your mom to explain everything tomorrow. You've had 30 wonderful years together, and I know you love her. Give her just one thing, and she won't leave you. Daddy, she loves you. She may have her one thing, two things, or 1,000 things, but she will never have me again. Forgiveness is beyond my capabilities. Everyone involved will be punished, including the lonely man who took my wife. A married woman. Now go away. You showed your true colors. You still have your mother. Nothing will change for you. You two are made for each other. Like I said, Brandy, in my heart, you are no longer my daughter. Now please leave me. With tears streaming down her face in agony, she literally ran out of the house, experiencing a pain she had never felt before. She never anticipated her father's reaction would be like this. Had he truly forsaken her? For the first time, she realized she might have overstepped a boundary by aiding her mom with this idea. Knowing he loved them both, she could see his anger clearly. No, he was furious, and she prayed he would forgive them. Immediately after Brandy departed, I dialed Maggie's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I left several messages pleading for her to call me and come home. After a few drinks and no response, I sent numerous text messages with the same plea. Still, there was no reply. By 2 o'clock in the morning, it dawned on me that she wouldn't return or answer my calls. Exhausted from self-pity, I simply stared at the TV, which was broadcasting more bad news. In an instant, my world transformed into a nightmare. I reflected on our 3 decades of marriage, recalling the fond memories, the birth of our daughter, the joyous celebrations, Brandy's wedding, and the close bond we shared. All now seemed lost forever. Before her infidelity, Maggie and I maintained closeness 2 to 3 times a week, albeit routine and less thrilling than in our youth. Yet there were no grievances. Post-coitus, we always embraced and drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. I love you was a daily exchange, and disagreements were rare. Gazing out the window, my eyes settled on the art studio I constructed for Maggie to nurture her passion. For 2 decades, she devoted herself to crafting remarkable paintings and sculptures, earning accolades displayed in the studio-turned-gallery I crafted to showcase her achievements. It became her sanctuary, a testament to her artistic prowess. While I adored her, I often felt relegated to a distant third in her priorities, behind our daughter and her art. Regardless, her happiness was paramount to me. Brandy's revelation rattled me to the core. The disclosure of her desire to seek closeness elsewhere blindsided me, a betrayal delivered through our daughter that stoked my fury and humiliation. Amidst my turmoil, I contemplated my life, my home, and the uncertain future ahead. My ancestral home, passed down from my grandfather, stood free of mortgage and stirred thoughts of vengeance in my inebriated mind. Fueled by anger and hurt, I pondered ways to inflict reciprocal pain upon Maggie. As I continued to peer out at her sanctuary, a surge of resolve coursed through me. With newfound vigor, I leapt from the couch, replacing sorrow with action. Over a dozen trips to our bedroom ensued, as I gathered Maggie's belongings and relocated them to her studio. Expensive shoes, dresses, clothes, jewelry, all now strewn across the floor of her artistic refuge. For the next hour, I scoured the house for photo albums, including our wedding mementos, stacking them atop the burgeoning pile. Then it struck me. She had vacuum-sealed belongings in the attic. Among them lay her wedding gown, infant garments, and numerous sentimental items, all of which I hauled down into the growing heap, now towering over a meter high. It's astonishing how much one person accumulates over the years. Removing all her framed photographs from the walls, I added them to the stack. Sculptures, sketches, and every cherished possession she held dear were amalgamated into this mounting pile of belongings. As the clock struck 5 in the morning, I remained on edge. Resolving to refrain from action until 6 a.m., I afforded her an opportunity to return home or respond to my calls and messages. Should I receive no reply or find her absent, I vowed to complete what I had started. Rechecking the house, I ensured every item of hers was now housed in the studio. At 5:30, I retrieved a 20-liter canister of gasoline from the garage and made my way to the studio. Preparing for 6 a.m. in the interim, I conducted online transactions, canceling joint credit cards, transferring funds to separate accounts, withdrawing cash from the safe, and packing a few suitcases. These I loaded into my truck, anticipating my temporary departure until legal matters were resolved. Waiting another 5 minutes for her potential return, by 6:05, my last glimmer of hope extinguished. I doused the pile and studio walls with gasoline. With a heavy sigh and brief hesitation, I made my fateful decision, igniting the heap with a lit match. The flames rapidly consumed her treasures, their glow already visible from the street before I could depart. The flames swiftly engulfed her world and everything dear to her. Driving down the highway, a sudden realization hit me, accentuated by my dire state. A profound sorrow washed over me, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, it dawned on me that my once blissful marriage had met the same fate as the studio. It had burned to the ground. What caught me off guard was the fires spread from the studio to the back porch, igniting both structures. Fortunately, firefighters managed to douse the blaze in the studio and contain the flames on the porch, salvaging the house. However, the residence suffered extensive smoke damage and was rendered uninhabitable until repairs were completed. Amidst the chaos, I checked into a highway motel roughly 90 miles away from the smoldering remains of my marriage, paying with cash. I was determined not to be found until I could gather my thoughts, opting for cash to avoid leaving a trail if the authorities pursued me. Fueled by adrenaline, I remained wide awake until I entered my room. Switching off my phone, I collapsed onto the bed, slipping into a deep slumber and only awakening at noon. As soon as I powered on my phone, it lit up with notifications. I found dozens of missed calls and texts from Brandy, Maggie, and the sheriff.
Upon exiting the Uber, I rendezvoused with Alexander at the restaurant, a mix of nervousness and excitement coursing through me as I beheld the sight of this attractive young man awaiting me at the reception desk. A smile graced his lips as he noticed my admiration of my little black dress, complemented by black sheer tights and matching high heels. His gaze lingered on my revealed cleavage, accentuated by the black bra peeking through. Earlier in the day, I had spent hours at the salon ensuring my hair and makeup were flawless, determined to make this one-time encounter thrilling, unforgettable, and flawless for him. My companion seemed pleased with the sight before him, his growing manhood subtly adjusting to his reaction. Bolstered by his apparent approval, my confidence soared as I greeted him with a tender kiss. As we exchanged greetings, we migrated to the bar, settling onto bar stools, where I caught him stealing glances at my nylon-clad legs down to my underwear as I rose. Our mutual smiles persisted as he placed our drink order. Deciding to silence my phone to avoid any distractions, I resolved to savor every moment of this unique evening, recognizing its fleeting nature. There was a palpable chemistry between us, and our rapport felt akin to that of old friends. I found myself lightly touching his arm and engaging in flirtatious banter, behaviors I rarely indulged in, even with Jason. But tonight, I was determined to embrace my inner confidence and relish in the experience. As we polished off our second glass, the gracious hostess announced our table was ready and ushered us to our seats. Dinner was delightful, and I relished our conversation and shared time. When he inquired if I still desired to spend the night with him, I slipped off my heels and teasingly slid my foot between his legs. His gaze lingered on my red toenails, peeking through the sheer nylon, eliciting a smile as he declared it was time to depart. Hand in hand, he guided me to his prearranged hotel room. As the elevator ascended to the 14th floor, the gravity of the situation struck me, and fleeting thoughts of Jason flooded my mind. Sensing my apprehension, he drew me close to his sturdy frame. Meeting his gaze, I was met with a passionate kiss unlike any I had experienced before. That moment was all it took to cast aside thoughts of my husband and marriage. Tonight, I was his, fully embracing the experience. Once inside the room, he wasted no time in unzipping my dress, allowing it to cascade to the floor before disrobing himself. Spinning me around, he praised my allure, then deftly removed my bra and guided me to the bed. The passage of time became a blur as the encounter unfolded, each moment suffused with sensuality and tenderness, leaving me yearning for more. Falling to my knees, I lavished attention on his exquisite form. After several moments, unable to resist any longer, he fervently removed my pantyhose and insisted I don my heels again, confessing their allure heightened his desire. Amidst our lovemaking, he peppered me with passionate kisses, displaying an expertise that left me awestruck. Fleetingly, I entertained thoughts of introducing similar passion to Jason, but quickly pushed such comparisons aside. His unwavering gaze met mine as he uttered the unexpected words, "I love you, Maggie," a declaration that stirred my soul. It felt akin to a divine revelation, evoking tears of pure joy. We engaged in lovemaking 4 more times throughout the night and once more in the morning, each encounter as passionate as the last. It stood out as the most incredible carnal experience of my life, and I commended myself for allowing it with Alexander. Thoughts of Jason started to intrude, but I endeavored to focus on the man embracing me tightly. Bathed in the morning sunlight filtering through the curtains, we shared tender kisses, his fingers gently caressing my hair. Maggie, as I mentioned last night, I was sincere. You're an extraordinary woman, so alluring and sensual, and I believe I'm falling in love with you. Can we see each other again? Suddenly, apprehension gripped me, and I sought to be delicate. Alexander, it was an extraordinary experience, and you're a kind, wonderful man. However, I'm happily married, and I can't repeat it. It was a one-time event. I cherished it, and you were amazing. You're a fantastic lover, and every moment was enjoyable. Maggie, please think it over before you decline. Your husband doesn't appear to object, and if you allow this to continue, I can bring you great happiness. Just consider it before saying no. Please. All right, yes, I'll consider it. With another deep kiss, he held me close, and I surrendered to his embrace. If I weren't married to Jason, I'd be with Alexander in an instant. Yet Jason is my husband, and I hoped he could forgive me for my actions. Following breakfast, we departed the hotel, and as he drove me home, I switched on my phone for the first time since our date the previous night, stunned by the multitude of missed calls and texts. Seeing Jason's message, a pang of guilt pierced my heart. This dear man was in anguish and I was absent. Tears welled in my eyes, realizing I had caused his suffering. Before I could proceed to the next text, the phone rang as Alexander pulled into my neighborhood. "Mom, where are you?" "Hey, sweetie, I'm almost back home." "Mom, there was a fire at the house. We tried calling you all night, but it seems you turned off your phone." "Fire? Where's your dad?" "That's the thing, Mom. He's missing. Nobody knows where he is, and he's not picking up calls either. I have a bad feeling. Mom, I'm almost there. I'll call you back." As Alexander turned onto my street, I spotted a fire truck and police vehicles outside our house. Noticing no visible damage at the front, I inquired with the firefighters about the situation. "Are you the homeowner?" one of them asked, as curious neighbors eyed me standing beside an unfamiliar handsome man, my companion. "Yes, I'm Maggie Spencer." "Well, Mrs. Spencer, we managed to salvage the house. Only the rear porch suffered damage. However, you won't be able to stay here until professionals clean up the smoke residue inside. The cottage at the back, unfortunately, couldn't be saved." My legs gave way, and Alexander supported me, guiding me to sit on the curb. "Is she destroyed?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Spencer, but all that remains are charred remains. We'll investigate the cause of the fire, but for now, The police detective has a few inquiries for you." I hurriedly rose and headed towards the back of the house before Sergeant Wilson could interrogate me. He caught up as I stood before the remnants of my cherished sanctuary. Instantly, I suspected Jason's hand in this, a retaliatory act for my indiscretions. "Mrs. Spencer, do you have any idea what happened here?" inquired Sergeant Wilson. "No, I wasn't here last night, and I'm clueless about what transpired," I replied. "Are you her husband?" He redirected his question to Alexander. "No, just a friend," he answered. A blush crept up my face as the sergeant cast a knowing glance and inquired about my husband's whereabouts. "I told you, I don't know." When pressed about my own location last night, I timidly admitted to being with Alexander at the Hilton Hotel downtown. The scrutinizing looks from the sergeant and his assistant underscored the gravity of my situation. I had just confessed to not spending the night with my husband, who had also vanished. Now the detective had more questions. "Mrs. Spencer, are you and your husband separated? Do you know where he was last night?" "No, we're happily married," I insisted, only to realize the absurdity after disclosing my nocturnal escapade. "Do you have any idea of his whereabouts?" "No, he's not answering calls." "We'll need to speak with him, so when you do, please provide him with my contact information," he instructed, handing me his card. Anger and fear surged within me. Anger at the loss of my sanctuary and years of labor, everything gone in an instant. Fear at the thought of Jason's potential rage and its implications for our marriage. I needed to reach him urgently. I dialed Brandy's number. "Brandy, have you heard from your dad?" "No, I haven't spoken to him since yesterday evening." "Why didn't you stay with him as planned?" "Mom, he kicked me out and disowned me," she revealed. Those words sent a shiver down my spine. Jason would never utter such words, and if he did, it would be far worse than I could fathom. Upon entering the house, I was met with smoke-damaged walls and a foul odor pervading our once cozy home. It was clear we couldn't stay here in such conditions. I surveyed the house and decided to gather clothes and personal items for a few days. In the bedroom, I found everything missing and panicked. My clothes, shoes, and belongings were gone. My heart sank as I searched for my wedding rings on the nightstand. None were there. Why had I left them? What was I thinking? If Jason saw them missing, he must have assumed the worst about our marriage. How foolish and selfish of me. In a panic, I scoured every room, realizing all my possessions were gone. A dreadful realization struck me. Had he truly destroyed everything? Was there nothing left? I rushed out of the house and returned to the studio, examining the remnants closely. Amidst the debris, I spotted photo frames and partially damaged clothing. It was evident Jason hadn't taken my day out as expected, but had obliterated everything dear to me, severing me from his life in one swift blow. I called Brandy in tears and recounted what had occurred, expressing my need for a place to stay. Alexander promptly offered his place, but he was the last person I wanted to see. I insisted on being alone and asked him to leave, hurting him with my abruptness. In that moment, anger swelled within me, directed both at myself and the man I had spent the night with. I recognized my wrongdoing, but unfairly placed blame on him for my selfish betrayal, when it was clearly my fault. "Brandy, I've lost your dad," I sobbed. "Mom, please don't say that," she pleaded. "Dad loves you, Mom," she reassured. "He burned everything, my clothes, paintings, my studio, all gone. He left me with nothing, not even a place to stay. He won't answer my calls. I hurt him the most, and I don't blame him. What I did is unforgivable. I should have talked to him instead of going on that date. We could have worked things out, but my selfishness drove him away. If I were in his shoes, I'd never take me back. What should I do now? I have nowhere to go, no clothes." "Mom, don't blame yourself. It's partly my fault. You can stay with us until your house is fixed today. We'll buy new clothes and get you settled tonight," Brandy offered. "Brandy, all my paintings and sculptures are gone. 30 years of marriage and 20 years of my work destroyed. And I'm left alone," I lamented, attracting the attention of neighbors passing by. "Oh my God, your dad's calling. I'll call you back." Struggling to answer the call, I nearly collapsed, but just managed to connect. "Jason, is that you?" I asked breathlessly. "Hi, Maggie, how are you?" Jason, where are you? Please come home, I pleaded. No, Maggie. I know everything from your daughter. Yes, your daughter, not mine. You're both dead to me. And this may be the last time we talk. Jason, no, please don't say that. I love you. You need to know this, I begged. Jason, the studio is gone. Did you do this? He demanded. Maggie, you did it. Not me. Maybe not physically, but you incinerated it with your betrayal. When I saw your wedding rings discarded and you gave yourself to another, you died in my heart. Your actions are unforgivable. And Brandy's involvement is shameful and incomprehensible. We're finished. I'll see my lawyers on Monday to start the process. Please, Jason, can't we talk and work things out? You can't just discard our 30 wonderful years like this, I implored. Maggie, we're talking. And I'm not the one discarding our 30 wonderful years. You planned to betray me, gave me 2 weeks of amazing love to ease your guilt, then cheated with your daughter's help. No one could accept or forgive such treachery. It was pure evil. I hope you regret it for the rest of your pathetic life. This is our last conversation. Contact my attorney for anything further. Goodbye, Maggie. Jason, hold on. Jason. Jason had vanished, taking with him the world I cherished and loved. Brandy arrived just as I was desperately calling Jason, who had already ended the call. We embraced, tears streaming down our faces as we mourned our loss. Eventually, we realized we couldn't stay amidst the wreckage of what was once our home. While authorities investigated the fire, we needed to regroup, so we headed to Brandy's house. Upon arrival, Brandy recounted the entire ordeal to Mike, who was taken aback by her explanation. Brandy attempted to explain everything, but when Mike discovered that his wife had arranged a date for her mother with a friend's father, he was appalled and furious. His anger flared. Brandy, you set up a date for your mother with another man. And worse, you knew your father would be alone. You should have known he wouldn't stand for it. What kind of man would allow his wife to go out with someone else? Is this what you envision for our future? Will you willingly betray me like your mother did to your father? He was a good man. You and your mom were his whole world. What have you done, Brandy? Let me tell you. You've shattered a good man and pushed him to extremes. I can't express how disappointed I am in you. I'll reach out to him and apologize for your thoughtlessness, but we also need to talk about us. Having children with you is on hold until I figure out where your values lie. I'll be blunt. I don't share them, and I won't tolerate such betrayal. She was taken aback by his anger and dismayed by his lack of understanding of her mother's predicament. It was just one date after 30 years of marriage, for heaven's sake. So what? Later, she realized the real issue was the collapse of her parents' marriage, her father's departure, and her mother's shattered happiness. Soon, they would all face the consequences of her actions.
5 days later, I returned home to assess the damage. Opting against an insurance claim to avoid additional costs, I informed the lawyer that the house was solely mine, not part of the settlement. Maggie could receive half our savings and no child support. If she resisted, I'd file for infidelity, exposing her affair with our daughter's friend's father. Divorce papers were filed, and I inquired about a criminal arson lawyer, but realized criminal prosecution was unlikely without an insurance claim. In the worst case, fines might be issued, but no charges would proceed unless a false report was filed. A neighbor, acquainted with Brandy from school, called her when she saw me return. Brandy rushed over as I inspected the damage. Hearing her enter, I focused on the task, glancing at the ashes that once housed Maggie's studio. Brandy found me in a bedroom, embracing me tightly. Daddy, I'm so sorry. Please forgive us. We love you. Brandy, I can't forgive either of you. I told you not to speak to me again. Now leave me be. No, you're my father, and you have to forgive me. I'm your daughter, and you love me. Listen, I have no daughter anymore. Just a woman who broke my heart. Leave me alone. Dad, Mom needs you. She's with us, misses you terribly, and wants to apologize. Will you come over? Never. Our marriage ended the moment she went on that date and left her wedding rings. It's over, and I won't speak to her. You can both contact me through my lawyer. I'll get a new phone and number. But for now, leave and be with your mother. Are you really ending 30 years of marriage? No, your mother did that when she took off her rings and went to her lover. You both destroyed my happiness, and I won't forget or forgive. Get out. Brandy left in tears, devastated by her father's disownment. His words cut deep, leaving a lasting pain that no therapy could heal. The following day, Maggie received divorce papers and was overwhelmed. Realizing her marriage ended due to her infidelity, she attempted to reconcile, sought counseling, and tried talking to Jason, but he remained silent toward her and Brandy. Mike eventually reached Jason, expressing his dismay at the girl's actions. He reconsidered having children due to doubts about Brandy's loyalty and involvement in the affair. Mike couldn't imagine living with someone with such values and is now in couples counseling to salvage their marriage. Maggie hoped to return to the rebuilt house, but the divorce decree awarded it to Jason. She received half their savings and $3,000 monthly child support for 10 years, which he had no intention of paying. Maggie must find employment to support herself, a responsibility she hadn't faced during their 30-year marriage. She eventually relocated from her daughter's apartment to a small one-room flat near the city center, where she secured employment at a small art gallery as a sales agent to make ends meet. Maggie's artistic freedom faced a sudden threat. No longer could she devote all her time to the splendid studio crafted by Jason, nor could she sit amid her art projects, savoring the serene lake view through the expansive panoramic windows gifted by her husband. Soon, work consumed her schedule, leaving little time to recreate the life she once knew. Gone were the days of leisure, along with her opulent and contented marriage, all for one exhilarating night with another man. There were never enough tears to erase the agony and remorse from that one-time affair. Knowing her beloved husband Jason would never speak to her again, especially after disowning their daughter, shattered her heart. Brandy spiraled into a deep depression following her parents' divorce, seeking solace and salvaging her crumbling marriage through therapy. Months later, the house was restored, and Jason continued to fulfill the court-mandated compensation. Without forewarning, he sold the house. Following the sale, Maggie approached him, seeking reconciliation and forgiveness. When she pressed the doorbell, a young couple welcomed her as they opened the door. "Hello, how can we assist you?" the woman inquired. "Yes, I'm seeking Jason Spencer." "He's here." "Oh, the kind man who sold us this house." "No, he mentioned he was leaving the country for a fresh start. He was incredibly pleasant and helpful. Are you Maggie by any chance?" "Yes, that's me." "He left an envelope and instructed us to give it to you if you ever came by." "Thank you. I'll read it later. Best wishes and enjoy this lovely home." Maggie sat in the car, tears streaming down her face, realizing she'd never encounter Jason again, and lamenting the love she had recklessly discarded. Returning to her solitary apartment, she sat on the bed, her hand trembling as she unfolded the letter. "Maggie, 30 remarkable years. I'll forever cherish the beautiful life we shared. You were my first and only love. I deeply regret not fulfilling my role as your husband. Had I known you needed more, I would have moved mountains for you. But since you've chosen to forge your path alone, that's how our marriage will conclude. Alone. Those 2 wonderful weeks leading up to your betrayal, I actually believed you had rekindled your love for me. They were the happiest weeks of our entire marriage. Learning from Brandy how you used those weeks to divert my attention from your betrayal shattered my soul. I'm certain your daughter has already informed you, but that night I was thrilled to come home and give you a special evening with 24 roses, your favorite chocolates, and wine. I planned to surprise you with a yacht cruise. Love. Discovering that your affection and admiration were insincere, and your true aim was to be with another man, left me utterly humiliated. Congratulations. You've destroyed me and our marriage. Because of this, I can't stay in this city any longer. I've resigned from my job and started a new life in another country. Don't bother looking for me, as I'll be off the grid. I have no desire to speak to you or your daughter anymore. This chapter of my life is closed, and I'm embarking on a new journey without you. It'll take me years to recover from the pain and betrayal you both inflicted. I couldn't bear to stay in our beautiful home without the love of my life and our wonderful daughter. Since you're both dead to me now, I have no reason to remain here. I sincerely hope your special night was worth our marriage and my love. I suspect it was. I'm certain you and your daughter will relish sharing stories. Have a happy life. And please forget about me and our years together, as I already have. My new life has already begun without you." Maggie believed she had no tears left, but after reading his letter, she cried uncontrollably all night, curled up in a ball. The excitement and memories of her encounter with Alexander faded into regret and sadness. Now 52 and alone, she foresaw a bleak future without Jason. She traded her luxurious life for one night of selfish thrill. Jason confronted Alexander late at night as he was departing for Ecuador. Pushing into the house, Jason introduced himself as Maggie's husband. accusing Alexander of stealing her. Despite Alexander's attempts to explain, Jason refused to accept any excuses. His pent-up anger and pain were unleashed on the man before him. Their exchange was brief as Jason wielded a crowbar. In less than a minute, Alexander's life changed forever. Before departing for the airport and leaving the country, Jason warned him, "I offer advice, idiot. Sleeping with a married woman is detrimental to your health." By the time Alexander reached the ER and informed the police, Jason was already on his way to a new life in Ecuador, free from his past burdens and family. It took detectives 2 weeks to ascertain Jason's departure and realize they couldn't pursue him until his return, with no extradition from Ecuador for assault charges. Alexander endured agonizing weeks in the hospital and months in physical therapy, adjusting to his new reality with reconstructed knees. The 25 stitches on his face would forever remind him of that fateful night with a married woman. Uncertain of his future, he knew his former life was irretrievably lost. Because of those 2 women who encouraged him to pursue another man's wife, he cut ties with Maggie and Brandy completely. Brandy's husband, Mike, almost ended their marriage over the incident. However, with the help of a psychologist, Brandy came to terms with her actions, vowing to remain faithful to Mike and their future family. Mike waited 2 years before agreeing to have children, ensuring his wife's commitment to fidelity. Honoring his promise and her remorse, Jason ceased all communication with Brandy. Through her actions, she permanently severed ties with her father and his affection. Hearing about Alexander's assault, Maggie and Brandy were devastated, feeling accountable for the attack and amplifying the guilt and anguish they inflicted on Jason and their family's ruin. It served as another stark reminder of the far-reaching consequences of their actions, unbeknownst to them. They both realized that their naive belief, that if only Jason had granted Maggie that one night their blissful life would have endured, was misguided. Their folly shattered any semblance of happiness. The loss of their father and husband inflicted a lasting pain they would carry until their final days. Hindered by depression and advancing age, Maggie never found another partner, leading a desolate, sorrowful existence. Their dreams of a joyful twilight with Jason and their grandchildren became a distant memory, especially since Jason ceased child support as soon as he left the country. Her savings won't last long, and she'll have to continue working to survive. Crying in her sleep became her usual activity. After selling my house and using my savings accumulated over 3 decades, I now possess more than $750,000. Deducting the cost of my new apartment, this substantial sum ensures comfort and tranquility for the next 30 years here in Ecuador. In this country, I've encountered many young, attractive women who appreciate the generosity of an American man, and I relish spending time with them. 6 months following that fateful night, I found myself on the beach in Puerto Lopez, sipping a cold beer in front of my new apartment. It dawned on me that divorce is a natural occurrence, and parting ways is acceptable. Being alone is okay. What's not acceptable is remaining in a situation where one is neither valued nor cherished. This will never be my reality again.
James and Lisa had been married for several years, a couple who, on the surface, seemed to have it all. James, at 36, was a hard-working man, dedicated to providing for his family and ensuring that their home was a place of comfort and security. Lisa, 2 years younger, was the social butterfly in their relationship. She was charming, with a magnetic personality that drew people to her effortlessly. Together, they were a picture-perfect couple. At least, that's what everyone else thought. Lately, however, things had begun to change. James noticed it first in the little things. Lisa's laughter seemed forced, her conversations with him shorter, and her attention often elsewhere. At first, he chalked it up to the stress of daily life. After all, they both had busy schedules, and the demands of work and social obligations could easily take a toll on anyone. But as the days turned into weeks, the distance between them grew more noticeable, and James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The upcoming neighborhood birthday party was something Lisa had been unusually excited about. She talked about it incessantly, planning her outfit, discussing who would be there, and how much fun it would be. James, however, wasn't as enthused. He had a lot of work to catch up on and didn't feel like mingling with the neighbors. But the more he thought about Lisa's excitement, the more uneasy he became. It wasn't like her to be so invested in a simple party. Was she trying to escape something at home? Or was there something, or someone, at the party that she was particularly eager to see? Unable to shake his doubts, James made a decision. He would go to the party, after all, but not to enjoy himself. He wanted to see for himself what was really going on with Lisa. The decision to attend the party came with a mix of apprehension and determination. James had always trusted Lisa. After all, they had built their lives together on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. But something about her recent behavior made him question whether that foundation was as solid as he once believed. The thought of spying on his wife felt wrong, almost as if he was betraying her trust. Yet, the nagging feeling in his gut told him that ignoring his suspicions would be a bigger mistake. As James prepared to leave for the party, he tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. Lisa had always been friendly and outgoing, especially with their neighbors. Tom and Nancy, in particular, had been close friends of theirs for years. They were the kind of couple who threw the best parties, always ensuring everyone had a good time. Maybe Lisa was just looking forward to a night of fun, a break from the routine. But deep down, James knew there was more to it. Lisa had left for the party earlier, wearing a dress that James hadn't seen before, something new, something she hadn't mentioned buying. She had looked stunning, but there was an edge to her excitement that didn't sit right with him. As she kissed him goodbye, there was a fleeting moment where their eyes met, and James could have sworn he saw a flicker of hesitation in her gaze. Or was it guilt? He couldn't be sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. As James drove to the party, he went over different scenarios in his mind. What if he found nothing unusual? What if Lisa was just having a good time, and he was the one overthinking everything? But what if he was right, and there was someone else occupying her thoughts? The possibilities were endless, and none of them provided him with any comfort. When he arrived at the party, the house was already buzzing with activity. Music played loudly, and laughter echoed from the open windows. James took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he might find. He wasn't here to confront Lisa. Not yet. He just wanted to observe, to understand what was really going on. As he stepped inside, he was immediately greeted by a wave of cheerful faces. The warmth and energy of the gathering should have been contagious. But James felt only a coldness settle in his chest. He scanned the room, searching for Lisa. When he finally spotted her, she was across the room, standing next to Tom. They were laughing, their heads close together, and James felt his stomach drop. The party was in full swing when James finally spotted Lisa. She was standing near the drinks table, deep in conversation with Tom, their neighbor. Tom was the kind of guy everyone liked, charismatic, funny, always the life of the party. He and Nancy had been a part of James and Lisa's social circle for years, but as James watched them together, something about their interaction felt off. Lisa was laughing, a light, carefree sound that James hadn't heard from her in a while. She seemed genuinely happy, but not in the way she was around him. Her body language was intimate, a tilt of the head, a playful touch on Tom's arm that sent alarm bells ringing in James's mind. He tried to shake it off. After all, they were just friends. But the more he watched, the harder it became to convince himself that there was nothing to worry about. James mingled with other guests, trying to distract himself, but his eyes kept drifting back to Lisa and Tom. They were still talking, now with their heads even closer together, their conversation seemingly more private. Every time Lisa laughed, James felt a pang of jealousy and hurt. He knew she was a naturally affectionate person, but this felt different, too familiar, too comfortable. As the night wore on, James's unease grew. He couldn't focus on any conversation he tried to engage in, his mind constantly replaying the image of Lisa and Tom together. He started noticing other small things, too. How they seemed to move through the party as a pair. How they shared little smiles and looks that no one else seemed to catch. It was like they were in their own world, and James was an outsider looking in. The more he watched, the more he started to question everything. Had Lisa and Tom always been this close, and he just never noticed? Or had something changed recently? James felt like he was going crazy, seeing things that weren't there. But every instinct he had told him that something was wrong. At one point, Lisa caught James's eye from across the room. She smiled at him, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile of acknowledgement, not of love or happiness. It was almost as if she was checking in on him, making sure he was still there, still oblivious. The thought made James's blood run cold. Was she hiding something from him? Was Tom in on it too? As the night continued, James's unease turned into suspicion. He started watching them more closely, waiting for a slip-up, a sign that his fears were justified. And then it happened. He saw Lisa and Tom exchange a look, brief, but filled with meaning. And then, as if by silent agreement, they both moved towards a hallway at the back of the house. James's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't want to follow them, didn't want to know what they were up to. But he had to. He couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut any longer. He needed to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. As James watched Lisa and Tom disappear down the hallway, his heart pounded in his chest. He stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing with possibilities. Maybe they were just getting some air, or maybe they needed to discuss something privately. But deep down, James knew that wasn't the case. The way they had been acting all night, the looks, the whispers, it all pointed to something more than just a friendly chat. James hesitated for only a moment before he quietly followed them. The party continued behind him, music and laughter filling the air, but to James, it all felt distant, like a background noise to the turmoil in his mind. He reached the end of the hallway, where a door was slightly ajar. The voices inside were low, but unmistakable. Tom and Lisa. Peering through the crack in the door, James saw them standing close together, their bodies almost touching. Lisa was speaking softly, her tone different from the one she used with him, more intimate, more vulnerable. Tom was leaning in, his face serious, as if they were discussing something deeply personal. The sight made James's stomach churn with a mixture of anger and fear. He strained to hear what they were saying, but their words were muffled. All he could catch were fragments. Lisa saying something about how things had changed. Tom reassuring her, telling her she deserved to be happy. James's heart sank as he realized what was happening. This wasn't just a friendly conversation. This was an emotional affair, if not something more. James felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. He wanted to burst into the room, to confront them, to demand answers. But he couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the shock of seeing his worst fears confirmed. The woman he loved, the woman he trusted, was on the verge of betraying him. And it was happening right before his eyes. As he stood there, watching, Lisa and Tom's conversation took a turn. Lisa looked up at Tom, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and longing. She took a step closer, and for a moment, it looked like she might kiss him. James's heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He wanted to shout, to stop her, but his voice caught in his throat. Then, just as suddenly, Lisa pulled back. She shook her head, as if coming to her senses, and took a step away from Tom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with realization. "No, Tom, I can't do this," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "This isn't right. I love James. I can't betray him like this." Tom looked at her, surprised, and perhaps a little disappointed. "Lisa, I just want you to be happy. If that means being with James, then—" But Lisa was already moving towards the door, her face a mask of guilt and regret. As she reached for the doorknob, James quickly stepped back, retreating into the shadows. He didn't want her to know he had seen. Not yet. He needed time to process what had just happened, to figure out what to do next. As Lisa hurried down the hallway, James felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. Relief that she hadn't gone through with it, anger that she had even considered it, and a deep, aching sadness that their marriage had come to this. He watched her go, feeling like a part of him was slipping away with her. James followed Lisa home, his mind a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. He kept his distance, not wanting her to know he had seen everything. The walk back to their house felt surreal, as if he were moving through a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of what he had witnessed pressing down on him. When they reached their doorstep, Lisa fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking. James could see the turmoil in her eyes, the guilt written all over her face. She finally unlocked the door and stepped inside, not realizing that James had been right behind her the whole time. He waited a moment before following her in, closing the door softly behind him. Lisa was already in the living room, sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard him enter, her eyes widening in surprise and fear. "James, I didn't know you were coming to the party," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. James didn't respond right away. He stood there looking at her, trying to find the right words. He had so many questions, so much he wanted to say, but all he could feel was a deep, overwhelming sense of betrayal. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with hurt. "Lisa, we need to talk." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, her guilt evident in every line of her face. "I know, James. I'm so sorry. I don't even know where to start." James sat down across from her, keeping a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm that had formed between them. "Why, Lisa? Why did you do it? Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? I need to understand." Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not you, James. It's me. I've been feeling lost, disconnected from everything. I thought maybe I could find something with Tom that I felt I was missing. But when it came down to it, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't betray you like that." James felt a mix of relief and anger at her words. Relief that she hadn't crossed that final line, but anger that she had even considered it. "But you were ready to, Lisa. You were about to kiss him. You were ready to throw everything away for what? A moment of excitement. Something new." Lisa's sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she cried. "I don't know, James. I've been so confused, so lonely. I love you, but I felt like we've been drifting apart. I didn't know how to fix it, and I made a terrible mistake." James stood up, pacing the room as he tried to process everything. His heart ached with the weight of her words, with the realization that their marriage wasn't as strong as he had thought. "Do you love him, Lisa? Do you want to be with him instead of me?" Lisa looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "No, James, I don't love him. I never did. I was just looking for something to fill the emptiness I've been feeling. But I know now that I don't want to lose you. I want to fix this, to fix us, but I don't know how." James stopped pacing, turning to look at her. The pain in her eyes mirrored his own. And for the first time that night, he felt a glimmer of hope. But it was quickly overshadowed by the uncertainty of their future. "I don't know if we can fix this, Lisa. I don't know if I can trust you again." Lisa nodded, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "I understand, James, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I just need you to know that I'm sorry, and I love you. I don't want to lose you." James sighed, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. He wanted to believe her, to believe that they could work through this, but the wound was still too fresh, too raw. "We'll take it one day at a time, Lisa, but things can't go back to the way they were. We need to talk, to really talk about what went wrong, and how we're going to move forward." Lisa nodded again, her expression filled with determination and remorse. "I'll do whatever it takes, James. I promise." James looked at her, his heart torn between love and hurt. He wanted to believe in her promise, but only time would tell if they could truly heal from this. Later that night, James lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the night played over and over in his mind, each memory like a stab to his heart. He glanced over at Lisa, who was lying beside him, her back turned. As he lay there, James thought about their marriage, about all the years they had spent together. They had been through so much, good times and bad, and had always come out stronger. But this felt different. This wasn't just a rough patch or a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal of trust, a fundamental breach in their relationship that would take time, if not a lifetime, to heal. James knew that the road ahead would be difficult. They would need to have some hard conversations to confront the issues that had led them to this point. And even then, there were no guarantees. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, and James wasn't sure if they could ever fully recover. But despite all of this, he wasn't ready to give up on their marriage. Not yet. Lisa had made a mistake, a terrible, hurtful mistake, but James knew that she was genuinely remorseful. She had stopped herself before crossing that final line, and that meant something. It meant that there was still a part of her that valued what they had, that wanted to fight for their relationship. And for that, James was willing to try. But as he lay there, the distance between them felt insurmountable. He knew it would take time, patience, and a lot of hard work to even begin to repair the damage. And there was always the chance that they wouldn't be able to. The future was uncertain, and that scared him. For now, though, they were still together. They hadn't given up on each other, and that was something. As long as they were both willing to try, there was hope. But it would be a long, difficult journey, and James wasn't sure if they would ever truly find their way back to each other. With a heavy heart, James closed his eyes, hoping that sleep would bring some respite from the pain. But even as he drifted off, the uncertainty of their future loomed over him, a shadow that would not easily be dispelled. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
When I received the surveillance footage, my heart sank. There they were, standing just outside the front door, Kathy and that guy. They didn't hesitate or seem worried about being seen. Instead, they made out right there, brazenly, before walking inside together. Watching it, I felt a cold wave of disgust and betrayal wash over me. 20 years of trust, of building a life together, crumbled before my eyes in those few seconds of footage. I instructed the investigator to compile the footage into a full report and let me know once it was ready. Seeing it in this undeniable form, something I couldn't just brush off or ignore, was like having the final nail driven into the coffin of our relationship. 20 years of marriage, shattered in an instant, reduced to something so base and thoughtless. There was no coming back from this. My name is Ted, and I'm 56 years old. I run a small automobile garage. I was married to Kathy, who was 52 when we separated. Right now, I don't want my family to know what's happening in my marriage because everything feels so raw. After 20 years together, I recently discovered that Kathy has been cheating on me. The way I found out was completely by accident. Kathy, who works as a nurse practitioner, told me she was called in for an overnight shift. When I couldn't get in touch with her, I got worried and called the hospital. They casually told me she had left hours ago. That didn't make any sense to me. Why would she say she had to work when she left so much earlier? It was in that moment that I started to realize something wasn't right. I decided to drive by her work, hoping to see her car parked there, but it was nowhere in sight. That uneasy feeling in my gut started to grow. I circled around the area, driving aimlessly, trying to spot her car, but I came up empty. I called her again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm, but inside, I was starting to worry. Something didn't feel right. Kathy had never been the type to keep secrets from me, not even when we were younger, back in college. If something was wrong, I felt she would have told me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and I didn't know what to do. I just knew I had to figure out what was going on. I kept driving around, searching, but still, no sign of her car. Eventually, I went home and sat there, waiting, hoping she'd call me back and explain everything. But the longer I waited, the more that sick feeling gnawed at me, leaving me with more questions than answers. At about 7 in the morning, she finally called. Her voice was calm, and she apologized, saying she'd had a busy night at the hospital and couldn't get back to me sooner. I knew she was lying. Something in her voice, her story, none of it added up. But instead of confronting her then and there, I just said, "It's okay. We'll talk when you get home." She came home around 8 a.m., looking exhausted. She launched into this detailed story about how one of her patients needed constant care throughout the night. I stood there, pretending to listen, but I couldn't focus. The only thing running through my mind was how to figure out why she was lying to me. As she talked, I watched her closely, every gesture, every word. After a while, she went to clean up, and then she headed to bed. I had to go to work, and since I work for the city, I couldn't just take time off to track her movements. If she was cheating, I needed to know for sure. During my lunch break, I called a few private investigators. It wasn't cheap, but these guys came highly recommended. I didn't have the time to keep following her around myself, and I needed the truth, no matter what it cost. Living in Georgia, I started looking into the divorce laws, even though a part of me didn't want to face that reality. I hadn't entered this marriage with the thought of it ending, but if Kathy was cheating, I knew I couldn't stay. Fortunately, we didn't have any children. Kathy had experienced 3 miscarriages over the years, and while those losses were tough, it was something we faced together. But this betrayal wasn't something I could just move past. This wasn't the marriage I had signed up for, and she wasn't the woman I married 20 years ago. Still, before making any final decisions, I needed to know for certain if she was unfaithful. The truth had to come out. The private investigator assured me he could uncover what Kathy was doing and who she was seeing, but it wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to pull the trigger on it just yet. I told him I needed some time to think it over. Later, when I got home around 5 p.m., I found Kathy in the bedroom, talking to someone on the phone. I couldn't make out who she was talking to, but her voice sounded tense, almost upset. I didn't want to barge in, so I headed to the kitchen and started making dinner. My mind was racing with suspicion, but I tried to keep calm. A few minutes later, she came in and joined me, acting as if nothing was wrong. But I could feel the distance between us, even in the silence. She told me she'd been discussing some personal issues with her best friend. That night, she had to work, so I took the time to prepare her a plate for dinner. We chatted for a bit before she headed off. Later, around midnight, I tried reaching her at the hospital. The staff informed me she had left about 30 minutes prior, saying she wanted to grab something to eat. That struck me as odd. I'd already made her dinner. That moment planted a seed of doubt in my mind, and I realized something didn't add up. Instead of calling her cell phone to follow up, I stayed quiet. The next morning, while driving to work, I contacted the private investigator. I gave him my credit card details over the phone, deciding to take the next step to uncover the truth. I decided to meet the private investigator in person after work, bringing along some photos and any other information I thought would be helpful. Once I got there, I handed over all the details and signed the necessary paperwork, making it clear that I wanted him to begin surveillance immediately. In the first few nights, he reported that my wife's car didn't move. It was surprising, but I felt it was only a matter of time before something surfaced. Then, a few nights later, I received a call from him. He had captured video footage of my wife entering someone's house late at night. He mentioned that her behavior seemed suspicious. When she walked out to her car, she would glance around, almost as if she were checking whether anyone was watching her. What struck me as particularly strange was that she appeared to change clothes in her car, switching into workout gear. The investigator said she would drive about 10 minutes from the hospital to this house, entering like she had a key. She stayed there for 45 minutes to an hour, and when she left, no one came to the door with her. It was all very discreet, and the way she moved made it seem like she didn't want anyone to notice her. The private investigator informed me that after visiting the house, my wife would drive back to the hospital, change back into her work clothes, and return to her shift. Turns out, all of this was happening during her lunch break. Despite the suspicion, I told him I needed more definitive proof, something that left no doubt she was involved with another man in an intimate way. As awful as that request sounded, I needed concrete evidence before confronting her. The investigator reassured me that he'd continue his efforts to gather more incriminating footage. A few nights later, he called again, saying he had more to show. This time, the footage revealed my wife meeting a man at an all-night diner. According to the investigator, she walked in, kissed the guy at the table, and then sat down with him. He mentioned she must have taken an extended lunch break because she was gone for almost an hour before heading back to work. However, this time things didn't play out the way they had before. There was something more brazen about meeting him at the diner, kissing him out in the open like that. It felt like a shift, a sign that things were escalating. After they finished eating, the private investigator reported that my wife and the man got into separate cars and drove to his house. They both got out, walked up to the front door, and started making out before going inside together. After seeing this footage, I instructed the investigator to compile everything and let me know when it was ready. In the days that followed, I began putting my affairs in order, mentally preparing for what was to come. I didn't want to leave anything to chance or have loose ends that would complicate things later. I met with my attorney, explained the situation, and he immediately began assisting me in filing for divorce. He offered sound advice on how to proceed, ensuring I was ready for the next steps in the process. A few days later, the private investigator contacted me to let me know he had compiled all the video footage. I went to his office, and he showed me everything he'd gathered. Despite knowing what I was about to see, it was still surreal to watch the betrayal play out on screen. Up until that point, I hadn't confronted my wife or changed my behavior around her. We had been dealing with a dead bedroom for a while, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the reason. When I discussed the divorce with my attorney, he brought up spousal support, which caught me off guard. I asked him why, and he pointed out the significant income disparity between us. My wife, as a nurse practitioner, earned close to $100,000 a year, while I made about $55,000. He suggested I pursue spousal support, and although I was initially skeptical, I eventually agreed to include it in the divorce proceedings. A few weeks after Kathy had been served with the divorce papers at her workplace, she called Ted immediately, her voice a mixture of shock, panic, and disbelief. "What the hell is this? Divorce papers? What's going on?" she demanded, struggling to comprehend the situation. Ted remained calm. "I think you know what's going on, Kathy." There was a long pause as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Her voice wavered, turning from confusion to cautious realization. "Wait, are you saying you had someone following me?" Ted didn't hesitate.
Yes.
Her panic turned to anger, her tone sharp as she snapped back at him. "You hired a private investigator? What the hell, Ted? How could you? That's disgusting. You went behind my back like that?" Ted, unfazed by her outburst, responded coolly. "I had to, Kathy. You weren't going to tell me the truth. I needed to know what was really going on." Fury now mixed with desperation, Kathy's voice wavered between outrage and pleading. "You invaded my privacy, Ted. You think that makes you any better than me? Spying on me like that? How long have you been watching me?" Ted's tone remained steady, though his words were firm. "Long enough. Long enough to know you've been sneaking around, lying to my face. I've seen the videos. I know everything." Kathy's anger began to fade as panic took over again. "Ted, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, fix things. You don't need to do this." "There's nothing to fix," Ted said, his voice cold. "You lied, Kathy. You've been cheating, and now you want to act like it didn't happen. You don't understand," Kathy pleaded, her tone softening in desperation. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was confused. I made mistakes. But we've been through so much, Ted. We can get through this too." Ted's voice grew sharper, cutting through her excuses. "What about all those nights you told me you were working late? Or the times I sat wondering why things were falling apart between us? You knew exactly what you were doing, Kathy, and you just didn't care." I never asked her why she cheated. The reason didn't matter. The dead don't question their killers about why they were killed. She had killed something inside me, my faith in her, and our marriage. There was no need for an explanation. Whatever reason she had wouldn't change the fact that she'd destroyed the trust we once had. It was over, and nothing she could say would make a difference now. I moved out and found my own apartment. The house was hers, a gift from her father before we got married, and I didn't want it. Letting go of the place felt like a relief, like shedding something that no longer belonged to me. However, when it came to the divorce hearing, I decided to pursue spousal support. Despite everything, I felt it was fair, given the financial disparity between us. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure I could move forward on stable ground, just like she would. After my ex-wife's attorney tried unsuccessfully to have the spousal support claim dismissed, the judge ruled in my favor, granting me spousal support for the next 6 years at a rate of $900 per month. I was honestly surprised to receive any support at all. Now, her deceit is going to cost her for the next 6 years, and each month will serve as a reminder of the consequences of her actions. After the divorce hearing, I felt a sense of freedom. I was finally a free man. From that point on, I never saw or heard from my ex-wife again. However, I did stay in touch with the private investigator for a while, and what he uncovered in the weeks that followed was shocking. The man my ex-wife had the affair with was a married police officer. Whenever she visited him, his wife was away on business. But when his wife eventually came home and discovered the affair, she was consumed by rage and shot him. He survived the shooting, and now his wife is awaiting trial for the incident. Since then, I've received my first alimony payment of $900. It seems this affair ended up being a costly mistake for her. I guess the old saying holds true, you have to pay to play. 6 years later, after the final payment, all the evidence of Kathy's cheating from the private investigator, videos, photos, and messages, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I gathered the contact information of her family and close friends, people she interacted with regularly. Then, I compiled everything, making sure it was clear and undeniable. I sent it all in one go, sharing the footage and messages with everyone close to her. Her betrayal wasn't just going to stay hidden between us. They all needed to know the truth about who she really was. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Husband falsely accused of cheating gets epic revenge after catching wife flirting at a party. Hey, who's that handsome guy? Both Cindy's husband, Jim, and their friend Barbara were taken aback by her question even before they stepped through the backyard gate. Barbara followed Cindy's gaze and spotted a friend of Adam, Cindy's brother-in-law. Just so you know, I'm right here, Jim reminded his wife. What? Can't I admire a good-looking guy when I see one? She retorted. Well, if you're going to check out some guy, I'd prefer if you kept it to yourself. Jim responded a bit bluntly before shifting his focus to their host. Hi, Barb, sorry about that. Barbara and her husband Tony were hosting an outdoor birthday party for their daughter, who had just turned 13. Barbara saw them approaching, but hadn't greeted them yet. She chose to overlook Cindy's question. No worries, you two. Come on in, she said, still holding the gate. Where should these go? Jim asked, holding up a case of beer. There are a few coolers by the tree filled with ice, Jim. Some have soft drinks for the kids, but the others are for the beer. Just pick an empty one. Gifts go on that table over there, she directed Cindy, who was carrying a nicely wrapped box. Tony, the CO host, spotted them and came over to welcome them. Hey, welcome you two, he said, kissing Cindy on the cheek. Jimbo, let me take that, as he reached for the case. Cindy made another attempt. Hey, Tony, who's the handsome guy sitting over there with your brother? Tony, a bit slow to catch on and unaware of the previous conversation, looked where she had gestured. Oh, his name's Bob something. He works construction with Adam. Why, do you know him? No, but I wouldn't mind, she replied. I mean, what a hunk. Tony glanced at Jim, surprised and not fully understanding the situation. He tried to lighten the mood. Watch out, Jim. Sounds like she's on the prowl, he joked. Jim was just as surprised. It seemed like his wife was trying to make him jealous for some reason, but he didn't want to ruin the party. So he chuckled it off and forced a smile. Yeah, sounds like she's ready to trade me in for a younger guy. That'll be the day, Barbara quipped, giving Jim's arm a playful slap. Well, come on in, you guys, Tony said. Barb, why don't you show Cindy where to put the gifts? When Barbara saw the expression on her husband's face, she understood exactly what he was implying. He hoped she would inquire about Cindy's behavior. En route to the gift table, she lowered her voice to ensure no one else could overhear. Okay, Cin, what's happening? Did you and Jim have an argument or something? What do you mean? Don't give me that. We've all been friends for a long time, and I've never heard you speak like that in front of Jim. Something's up. I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine. He's out all day flirting with every pretty girl he sees. You know Linda Kingston? Yeah. She saw Jim in a restaurant a few days ago. He obviously didn't notice her. She told me the waitress came over and kissed him. They talked and laughed through lunch, flirting the whole time. Cindy, Jim's a friendly, outgoing guy. That's just his personality. Having a girl kiss you is more than being friendly, Barb. It's crossing a line, and you know it. Tony kissed you on the cheek a minute ago. That's different. We've been friends for years. This is some waitress he flirts with when he goes there. I don't like it, and it definitely doesn't pass the wife test. The wife test? Yeah, you know, guys use it all the time, but for them, it's the husband test. A wife shouldn't do anything in public or private that she wouldn't do in front of her husband. Well, what's good for the goose, as they say. So, you chose my daughter's birthday party to give Jim a hard time? Don't worry, I won't do anything drastic. I wasn't even thinking about it until I saw Adam's friend over there. He's perfect. I just want to teach Jim a lesson. Well, do me a favor and don't start any fights, okay? I won't. Besides, look at that guy, he's built like a tank. Jim would be crazy to mess with him. All right. I see more guests coming up the walk, so I have to go do my meet and greet thing. I'll catch up with you later. Remember, no fights, okay? No fights, Barb, I promise. She glanced around and spotted Jennifer, the guest of honor, chatting with her friends. She decided to go over and wish her a happy birthday. Jim had just finished helping Tony with the beer and had the same idea. They both arrived at the same time. Cindy spoke first. Congrats, honey. You're officially a teenager. You can really give your parents a hard time now, she joked. That goes for me too, Jen, Jim added. The congrats part, I mean. I'm not sure about the giving your folks a hard time part, he teased. Jennifer laughed at Jim's joke. It was well known in their circle that she'd had a crush on him since she was a toddler. Thanks, she replied, while giving Cindy a hug and Jim a kiss on the cheek. These are my friends, Coral, Kathy, and Debbie, she introduced. They chatted with Jen and her friends briefly, but Cindy was eager to proceed with her plan to teach Jim a lesson. Hey, sweetie, she addressed the birthday girl. I'm going to go say hi to your uncle. Catch you later. Jim was about to accompany her when he noticed Tony signaling to him. As Cindy began to walk away, he remarked, Behave yourself. She shot him a wicked glance. Approaching Tony, who was still by the coolers, Jim inquired, What's up, buddy? Just wanted to give you a heads up. Barb talked to Cindy. Seems like you've been flirting with some waitress. Cindy caught wind of it and has this idea to teach you a lesson. I'm guessing that's what all this hunk talk is about. Jim pondered for a moment. I have no idea what she's talking about. I haven't flirted with any waitress that I'm aware of. Did she mention where or who supposedly saw me? I'm not sure, she didn't specify, but I think she's planning to use Bob to make you jealous, so try to stay cool, okay? Meanwhile, as Tony and Jim conversed, Cindy approached her target. Hi, Adam. Hey, Cindy, how's it going? All right, I guess. Who's your handsome friend? Adam was taken aback while his friend stood and introduced himself. Hi, I'm Bob. I assume you were talking about me, right? He said with a charming grin. Who else? She replied. Hey, Cindy, Adam interjected. Where's Jim? He's over there chatting with your brother. I'd love one of those, she said, pointing to the beer Bob held. Hey, Adam, why don't you be a gentleman and grab the lady a beer while we get to know each other better? Not wanting to be rude, Adam obliged. As soon as he headed for the coolers, Bob offered Cindy his now vacant seat. As she sat down, she glanced over to see her husband glaring at her. Seeing his reaction only fueled her confidence that her plan was working. She turned to engage in conversation with her new acquaintance. Meanwhile, when Adam reached the coolers, he approached Tony and Jim. Hey, what's up with Cindy? Why, what happened? Jim inquired. She's cozying up to Bob over there. Who's he anyway? Jim asked. He works with me. We're on that big high-rise downtown. I've known him about 6 months. Seems all right, but he's a bit of a ladies' man, and I wouldn't trust him around women. He didn't bring a date? Jim asked. Nah, it was sort of a last-minute thing. He was supposed to play golf today. We got off work last night around, and he got a text canceling. Started complaining about having nothing to do today, so I invited him to the party at least. Jim now understood what his wife was up to, though he wasn't sure how to handle it. He knew Cindy well. Once she got an idea in her head, she wouldn't let it go until she made her point. Ignoring her might push her further, but confronting her might provoke Bob. He aimed to avoid that scenario at all costs. Adam, do me a favor, will you? Just keep an eye on things. Let me know if it starts to get out of hand. Adam acknowledged Jim's instructions and grabbed a cold beer from the cooler before returning to where Bob and Cindy were engaged in conversation. Handing Cindy her beer and pulling up another chair, Adam felt it was time to interject. Hoping Bob would catch the hint, he mentioned having seen the pictures Jim took of the lumberyard fire and praised his talent, wondering if Jim planned to enter the press photographers contest again that year. Though slightly annoyed by the interruption, Cindy politely replied that she assumed Jim would participate. She then informed Bob that her husband worked as a photographer for the Tribune and had won several awards at a state contest for press photographers the previous year. Bob responded with a hint of disdain, acknowledging Jim's presence across the yard. Cindy confirmed it was indeed Jim, a response delivered with a dismissive tone that didn't go unnoticed by Bob or Adam. Bob shifted the conversation, expressing his enjoyment of working with his hands and constructing enduring structures. He then directed a question to Adam, asking for validation, to which Adam could only respond with agreement. Assuming Bob had effectively shut down the conversation about her husband, Cindy immediately resumed chatting with Bob, essentially excluding Adam from the discussion. He felt foolish. He'd heard Bob use that same line about working with his hands on women in bars before. It always seemed to impress them, and here Adam had unwittingly given Bob an opportunity. Feeling he was doing more damage than good, Adam excused himself to wish his niece a happy birthday for what felt like the 20th time. Jim circulated, mingling with the others while closely observing Cindy and her companion. Although none of the men mentioned his wife's interaction with another man, the women began to gossip. Jim overheard Jenny discussing the situation with her friends, mentioning that the man Cindy was with worked as a newspaper photographer. She added that her dad commented on how photographers often find themselves in various challenging situations due to their job. Jenny expressed surprise that Jim hadn't intervened physically. Jim chuckled to himself. It wasn't really Bob's fault after all, it was his wife's. And as frustrated as he sometimes felt, he'd never resort to violence against her or any other woman. Glancing over, he noticed an empty beer bottle next to Cindy's chair, and another in her hand already. She tended to drink more when she was nervous. This wasn't good. Bob had 3 empty bottles beside his chair. Just then, Tony mentioned that everyone seemed to be getting hungry. As he stood by the grill, Jim, preoccupied with Cindy, hadn't even noticed the enticing aroma of grilling meat. Tony then announced the food options available, including burgers, brats, and chicken patties, along with various sides on the nearby table for everyone to help themselves. Jim thought it might be a good opportunity to separate Bob from his wife. Perhaps they could find a quiet corner to eat, and he could learn more about this person he was supposedly flirting with. As he turned toward them, he saw the potential lovebirds setting their beers down beside their chairs and standing up. Apparently, Bob had decided that Cindy was his for the day and possessively took her by the elbow. Not happening, Jim muttered to himself. He quickly walked over. "Excuse me, could you remove your hand from my wife?" Bob immediately released Cindy's arm and raised both hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Sorry," he half-chuckled. We're just heading to get some food." "Yeah, well, I can handle it from here, thanks," Jim retorted angrily. He grasped Cindy's other elbow and led her over to the food table. "What's gotten into you?" Cindy questioned. That was incredibly rude. Ignoring his wife's remark, Jim guided her in front of him as they joined the food line. "Grab some food," he stated flatly. "You and I are going to have a talk over by the shed while we eat." Observing the confrontation between Jim and Bob, Adam seized the chance to speak to his colleague, now alone for the first time in a while. "What are you doing?" he asked, irritated. "She's married to one of my brother's closest friends. Leave her alone." "Hey man, you should be telling her to leave me alone. She's the one hitting on me. I'm just being polite." "Polite, my foot. Seriously, Bob, cut it out. Look, if you think you stand a chance with her, forget it. She's using you to get back at Jim over some waitress. Stay out of it. Listen, married or not, I've never turned down a beautiful woman like that in my life. I know women, and I think you're mistaken about her using me. She's genuinely interested, I can tell. I think you should leave. This is my niece's birthday party, and I don't want any trouble. All right, I'll back off. If she approaches me again, I'll send her right back to her husband, all right? If you don't, you're out of here, Bob. I mean it." "Scout's honor," he responded, holding up the Boy Scout salute. "Now, can I go get something to eat?" "Yeah, go ahead." Cindy wasn't particularly bothered by Jim stepping in between her and Bob. They had only known each other for a few hours, yet he was already becoming overly familiar, not to mention the suggestive comments he was making. Although it amused her to see how easily she could manipulate a man like that when she wanted to, still, she could sense from the way Jim had taken hold of her arm that she had pushed her husband as far as she should. She had promised Barbara no drama, and Jim had proven he wasn't intimidated by Bob's physique. She needed to spend the rest of the day with her husband. She just hoped he had learned his lesson. They both filled their plates with food, and Jim gestured toward the shed, away from the crowd. When they found a quiet spot, he handed Cindy his plate. "Here, hold this while I fetch a couple of chairs. I'll be right back." Despite his anger, Jim remained a gentleman, holding the back of her chair as Cindy sat down. He pulled his own chair alongside so they could talk privately. After a few bites, Jim couldn't contain himself any longer. As he was always direct, he questioned Cindy about the talk regarding him flirting with a waitress, expressing his dislike for such games. Cindy responded by saying she wasn't certain about the exact details, but that it supposedly occurred sometime last week. Jim remarked sarcastically about the vagueness of the information. Cindy then suggested that Jim might have a better understanding of the situation than she did, questioning if he flirts with every waitress. Surprised, Jim interjected, asking if he was told he kissed them. Cindy confirmed this, leading Jim to assert that there were only 2 possibilities. Either it was a mix-up or someone was feeding her lies, as he had only kissed Cindy since they started dating. Cindy gazed into his eyes. Though she usually felt she could gauge his honesty through his gaze, she wasn't entirely sure, as he had never lied to her as far as she knew. Why would someone claim they saw you kissing a waitress if it wasn't true? "Beats me," he shrugged, taking another bite from his burger. "Since she's your friend, ask her." "How do you know it's a woman?" "It better be a woman. If a male friend told you he saw me kissing a waitress, then you've got your answer." Initially, Cindy entertained the thought that he might have seen her friend in the restaurant and kissed the waitress anyway, disregarding the potential consequences. But she wasn't sure what he meant by his last statement. "What do you mean, if it's a man? I've answered my own question. Simple. If it is a man, he's into you and trying to stir up trouble between us. He's probably hoping to cozy up to you by playing the supportive friend. That's absurd. Is it? Think about it. Was it a man? No. All right, then we're back to square one. You'll have to ask your friend why she's misleading you. An uneasy silence followed as they both finished their lunches. When they were done, Jim had a few parting words. This is Jenny's birthday party, and I won't let it be spoiled by a fight with your friend. So if you keep cozying up to him like you have been, I'll just leave you here, and you can find your own way home. Or you can spend the night with Mr. Muscles, but then you won't have a home to come back to. Understand? She was taken aback by his intensity. Jim, calm down. I'm not going home with Bob. I wasn't even considering it. I was just trying to show you what it feels like to have your spouse flirting with someone else, that's all. Well, now you've shown me, so let's end it here. He stood, took his wife's paper plate and empty beer bottle, and walked over to dispose of them. As he turned back, he was relieved to see his wife right by his side. Bob, however, was displeased. He had been sneaking glances at the two of them talking while he sat alone eating his chicken patty. He had no doubt Cindy was genuinely interested. She was eager for action. However, he also acknowledged the need for discretion. Earlier, he had hoped for an opportunity to slip away with her, perhaps to an upstairs bedroom or his car, but now such plans were off the table. They were being watched. He'd have to postpone indulging his desires, at least for now. Despite their underlying tensions, Jim and Cindy were determined to enjoy the rest of the party. She stuck close to him for the remainder of the day, occasionally drifting off to chat with friends, but always returning to his side. The only other interaction Cindy had with Bob was during the group rendition of Happy Birthday, when everyone gathered around Jenny's cake. Bob took advantage of the moment to sidle up beside her and discreetly touch her backside while everyone sang. Initially, she assumed it was Jim, but when she glanced over, she saw Bob wearing a smug grin on his face. She was stunned by his audacity. Glancing around quickly to check for any observers, she found everyone focused on Jenny. Normally, she would have reacted by slapping him, but she knew it would only stir up trouble, something she desperately wanted to avoid. Besides, she realized it was partly her own fault for encouraging him. If given the chance, she'd apologize to him and make it clear she wasn't interested. He withdrew his hand to join the applause as the birthday girl effortlessly blew out the candles. Jim glanced over when he heard Bob's voice nearby, but saw nothing significant. Certainly, Cindy wasn't about to confess to Jim about Bob's inappropriate behavior during Happy Birthday. Naturally, Bob interpreted her silence as assent. He knew how to manipulate the situation. She had to stay close to her husband to avoid suspicion, but eventually, she would need to slip away to use the restroom indoors. Hopefully, he could catch her alone to arrange a meeting. He'd keep a discreet watch. For those aware of the earlier incident, the perceived threat seemed to have passed. Much to their relief, both Bob and Cindy seemed to be on their best behavior, so, with the possible exception of Jim, they all relaxed and let down their guard. Jim, however, had encountered guys like Bob before, men who thought they were irresistible to women and knew they were rarely dissuaded easily. Just to be cautious, he resolved to continue keeping an eye on the potential troublemaker. The party kicked into high gear after dinner. Tony turned up the outdoor speakers and played background music from Pandora while games were set up. A dartboard was placed on the large oak tree near the shed, and Jenny's friends helped her set up the beanbag toss. Some women gathered card tables for bingo. Jenny and her friends suggested a best-of-3 beanbag game to her parents. Jim and Cindy, Tony warned them about Jenny's skill. Fortunately, the adults won the first game, but the subsequent victories went to the youngsters. After the game, Cindy kissed Jim on the cheek and informed him that she needed to use the restroom and would return shortly. Jim replied that he might challenge Adam to a game of darts. Cindy stopped to chat with friends on her way to the house and was fortunate to find the downstairs restroom unoccupied, so she slipped inside. Adam observed Bob's departure and muttered to himself about it, catching Jim's attention. Jim paused mid-throw and inquired about Adam's comment. Adam clarified, "Bob seems to be leaving without saying goodbye or expressing gratitude for the invitation." Jim turned around and caught a glimpse of Bob exiting through the gate, suggesting that Bob might be upset because Cindy wasn't paying him attention anymore. Adam mentioned that he probably had plans with her. Adam agreed, noting that Bob was skilled at charming women, recounting instances where he had seen Bob leave a bar with attractive women. Jim turned back to the dartboard, taking careful aim when a thought struck him. How would someone enter the house without being seen? They'd leave through the gate, circle around to the front, and enter that way. Handing the darts to Adam, Jim mentioned that he would be right back before making his way toward the back door. Cindy had finished her business and was touching up her makeup. Upon opening the bathroom door, she was stunned to find Bob standing there. Before she could react, he seized her shoulders and pinned her against the doorframe, forcefully locking their lips together. In an instant, had Jim been a split second later, he would have witnessed his wife forcefully pushing Bob away. However, in that moment, she hesitated as she tried to regain her senses. It was then that Jim caught sight of them. He grabbed Bob's shoulder, pulling him away from Cindy, and with a forceful blow to Bob's solar plexus, sent him stumbling back into the washroom, where he collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. As Cindy's brain struggled to process the rapid events, she felt overwhelmed. It all happened so quickly. She turned to find her husband, but he was nowhere to be seen. Panicked, she searched in every direction, calling out for Jim, but he was nowhere in sight. Then she heard the sound of a car starting. Rushing to the front door, Cindy watched as their car backed out and drove off. Realizing how the situation must have appeared, especially given her previous interactions with Bob and ignoring Bob, who was still gasping for breath, she dashed out the back door. The first person she encountered was Adam, who was still waiting for Jim's return, unaware of the unfolding drama. "Adam, you have to drive me home now," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic. Confused, Adam looked at her, trying to make sense of the situation. "Cindy, what happened? Where's Jim?" "He left. He caught Bob kissing me and—" "What, is he hurt?" "No, Bob's still in the house. I'm not sure if he's hurt or not. Jim punched him really hard." Adam couldn't help but smirk. "Jim punched Bob?" Yeah, please, Adam. I have to get home so I can explain what happened. He was so mad, I'm not sure what he's going to do. I'm afraid he's planning to leave me." "I doubt that, Cindy. He's upset, but I don't think he's that upset. You didn't see him just now, Adam. I was the first one here. I doubt I'll be able to get my car out. I'm sure I'm blocked in. Please, Adam." "All right, give me a second to tell Tony we're leaving, and I'll see if we can get out of here." After briefing Tony, Adam returned, confirming their predicament. "Cindy, you'll have to call a cab." "I can't get out, but you can borrow my car." "Are you serious? Thank you." Grateful and relieved, Cindy hurriedly got into Adam's car, knowing she needed to reach Jim before it was too late. There was only about a foot of space between Adam's car and the garage door. He turned the wheel completely to the right and edged forward until his front bumper gently nudged the door. Then he reversed, turning the wheel the other way until his rear bumper lightly touched the car behind him. He repeated this maneuver several times until he could back out onto his brother's meticulously kept front lawn, leaving only about 2 inches of clearance between his car and the one behind. Throughout the journey, Cindy remained silent, lost in her thoughts. She couldn't shake the image of her husband's enraged expression from her mind. His fury was unlike anything she had seen before, and his physical reaction was unprecedented. As they approached her driveway, anxiety gripped her. She dreaded facing whatever awaited her at home. Soon they turned into her driveway, with Adam parking behind Jim's car. Adam offered to accompany her inside, but she hesitated briefly before declining, expressing gratitude but insisting that she would handle the situation herself, since she felt responsible for it. Upon exiting the car, she signaled to Adam that she would manage and climb the porch stairs, each step filled with apprehension. Entering the house, she prepared herself for what she might encounter. Jim was nowhere to be seen, and she worried he might be upstairs packing. Just as she began ascending the stairs to confront him, she heard the coffee grinder. A glimmer of hope flickered within her as she thought, "He's making coffee?" Jim, observing her silently from the kitchen doorway, broke the silence by asking if her lover had brought her home. Cindy clarified to Jim that Bob was not her lover, mentioning that the last time she saw him, he was still on the bathroom floor struggling to catch his breath. Jim nodded in response, but remained silent, which unsettled Cindy. She had expected some kind of reaction from him, whether it be anger or embarrassment. Since Jim seemed unwilling to speak, Cindy decided to take the initiative. "He caught me off guard, Jim. I wasn't willingly engaging with him. He ambushed me as soon as I opened the door, pushing me against it and kissing me." "I didn't see you resisting him," Jim shot back. "You intervened before I had the chance. I was stunned. It took me a moment to comprehend what was happening. But you struck him before I could push him away." She still wasn't certain if her husband's behavior indicated genuine calmness, or if it was merely the quiet before a storm. Throughout their conversation, he remained occupied with his tasks. She almost wished he would express his anger openly. His apparent indifference left her feeling anxious. "Well?" she prompted. "Well, what?" he replied, hitting the start button on the coffee maker. "Jim, I've never seen you so angry before. I honestly expected you to be packing your bags when I got home." "Don't tempt me," he growled, his voice rising slightly. You're damn right I'm angry. That stunt you pulled was immature and disrespectful. The only reason I'm not even more upset is because most people at the party knew what you were doing. But you know what infuriates me more than you making a spectacle of yourself? The fact that you chose to trust one of your shallow friends over me. Have I ever lied to you, huh? His suppressed anger began to surface. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me or be jealous? No, never. She had never heard him refer to her friends as shallow before, but she chose not to address it. Honey, I know how outgoing you are. I've witnessed it. You can strike up a friendship with anyone in minutes, even women. You may not realize it, but I've seen the way they look at you when you walk away. I know they'd be willing to drop their inhibitions in an instant. Oh, that's ridiculous. You're making me sound like Brad Pitt or something. The situation was escalating. She needed to diffuse it before it escalated further. Jim, all I'm saying is that you have a charming personality. People are drawn to you. I just want you to understand that some women interpret that as flirting. They might think you're available, married or not. She hoped she had eased the tension. So how does that justify you believing that I go around kissing waitresses and trusting your friend over your husband? Damn, she thought. She had hoped to avoid that question. Their argument persisted for another 20 minutes without resolution, both refusing to yield on the fundamental issue of trust. Despite their disagreement, neither of them opted to sleep on the couch or in separate rooms. But Cindy sensed that intimacy was out of the question. He wasn't in a forgiving mood, and she wasn't willing to degrade herself by attempting to change his mind. The following Tuesday, Jim met Tony for a drink after work. Jim was already seated and had just taken a sip from his beer when his friend arrived, wearing a wide grin. Yo, Rocky, how's Adrian? Tony quipped, attempting a Stallone impression. Jim glanced at his friend. Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that? Yeah, but I can't pull off a Burgess Meredith impression, so you'll have to settle for what you get. He chuckled, taking a seat beside Jim. He ordered a beer. Seriously, how are things between you two right now? We're barely on speaking terms. I'm still angry, and she knows it, so she tends to avoid me. When are you going to cut her some slack? Most people at the party didn't even realize there was any tension between you two. After you left, some folks were asking about you and Cindy. What did you tell them? I said something unexpected came up and you had to leave. Nobody questioned it. They probably assumed you two were eager to get home and, well, you know. Tony chuckled. Yeah, well, we haven't exactly been eager to get in bed since the party. Speaking of which, what's the deal with Bob? Is he plotting revenge? I doubt it. Adam filled me in on what happened before he drove Cindy home. When I went inside, Bob was just getting back on his feet. He mentioned you landed a sucker punch. I sure did, Jim interjected. Well, he was talking about getting back at you, but I warned him to steer clear of you. I told him you're the toughest guy around and that I've seen you take down guys twice your size. I even threw in my favorite Bible quote. You have a favorite Bible quote? I didn't know that. Sure do. Yeah, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of pass away, he fears no evil, for he's the toughest and meanest SOB in the valley. That's you. Jim couldn't help but laugh. That's nonsense and you know it, he retorted. Of course I know it and you know it. But Bob doesn't. I think I scared him enough to make him think twice before messing with you. Well, I appreciate that, buddy. They both grinned and took another sip of their drinks. You know what really annoys me? Jim began. That she doesn't believe me about not kissing some waitress. Are you absolutely sure you didn't? Maybe just a peck on the cheek or something like that? No, he trailed off, and Tony could tell from his expression that he recalled something. Aha, you did kiss her, didn't you? No, she kissed me, Jim responded. Damn, I know what this is all about. The following day, Cindy was surprised to see Jim walking into her office at work. He immediately informed her that he was taking her to lunch. Before she could react, assuming it was his way of apologizing, she expressed gratitude but mentioned it was a bit early and asked if he could wait about 20 minutes. Jim reassured her, saying there was no need to wait. He had already spoken to her boss, explained the situation as a minor family emergency, and arranged for an extended lunch hour, which her boss agreed to. Jim urged her to come along, and Cindy, feeling apprehensive as she wasn't aware of any family emergency, followed him to the car. As she got in, Jim held the door for her. She questioned him about their destination and the nature of the family emergency. He didn't directly answer her question, but instructed her to call her friend and get the name of the restaurant where the alleged incident occurred. When she asked why, he simply told her to trust him and mentioned that he believed he had figured something out. Reluctantly, she called her friend and obtained the restaurant's name, Deary's on Holman Avenue. He responded with a smile, commenting on the coincidence that they were headed exactly there. Cindy remained silent but felt increasingly uneasy. She couldn't fathom why he would want to revisit the scene, except perhaps to confront her. Would he flirt with the waitress in front of her? She knew he wouldn't do that. She decided to wait and see what unfolded. The journey to the restaurant took nearly half an hour, during which Cindy agonized over numerous scenarios. She was almost in tears when they arrived. Jim placed his hand on her back and guided her inside. She knew trouble awaited her the moment they entered. "Damn," she muttered quietly. Jim found a booth and had Cindy sit first, then joined her. "Well, 'cause looks like you brought your better half today." Cindy blushed with embarrassment. "Hi, Marilyn," she greeted their waitress. "Hi, Cindy. How did you manage to get my cousin here for a real lunch, and with his wife no less?" "Every time I see him, he's in such a hurry he can barely eat," she joked. Jim wasn't about to let Cindy off easily. "Cindy seems to think you and I are having a passionate affair," he announced. Cindy waited for the punchline before responding. "What? No, Marilyn, that's not true." Cindy turned to her husband. "Jim, come on, I made a mistake. I apologize." She faced Marilyn again. "A friend told me last week that he kissed a waitress here. I didn't even know you worked here." "But we haven't," Jim interrupted. "You gave me a peck on the cheek when I arrived." "Oh gosh, Cindy, I didn't mean anything by it." Jim hadn't visited in a while, and it was just a friendly gesture. "Marilyn, don't worry about it," Cindy assured her. "I understand now. My friend misled me into thinking Jim had a thing with a waitress here. I'll be giving her a piece of my mind later." "I'd like to hear that," Jim challenged. Cindy looked at him and accepted the challenge. "All right," she said, retrieving her phone from her purse. Both Jim and Marilyn listened in on Cindy's side of the conversation. "Hi, Linda. Not too good. You know that waitress who you said was kissing Jim? You know who that was?" "Jim's cousin." "Yeah, his cousin." "No, I didn't appreciate you telling me. You made it sound like he was having an affair or something." "I don't care what you thought. I don't care if you think you see him screwing somebody in the middle of the floor. From now on, keep your gossip to yourself." "Yeah, you too." She almost hurt her finger disconnecting the call. Jim had a hunch it was Linda stirring up trouble. She frequently made derogatory remarks about her own husband. Cindy was worked up after the call. "I truly apologize to both of you. Jim was right. I should have known better." "You have a few more apologies to make when you get home tonight," Jim reminded her. "You're going to apologize to Tony, Barbara, and Jenny." "What about Bob?" "You can tell Bob to take a hike. You don't pursue a married woman no matter how much of a flirt she is." Marilyn, still standing nearby, asked, "Who's Bob?" "Her boyfriend," Jim joked. "Boyfriend?" she questioned. "Don't listen to him, Marilyn. I made a mistake and he's not done rubbing my nose in it yet." "It sounds like you two had quite a weekend," Marilyn observed. "Let's just say I'm pretty sure Cindy learned a lesson about trust," Jim replied. Cindy was more than a little embarrassed. Her face flushed as she opened the menu. "So Marilyn, what do you recommend?" Later after dinner, Cindy spent almost an hour on the phone apologizing to their friends, including Jenny. That night, they both lay undressed in bed. "Are you still mad?" she asked. "It depends." "On what?" "On whether you still think I would cheat on you." "I never really believed you'd cheat on me. I was worried you might give some woman the wrong impression. I just didn't want you leading her on." He considered her words and remembered how angry he felt watching her flirt with Bob. He'd never admit it, but he did understand her perspective a bit better now. Just as he was about to tell her he forgave her, he felt her hand slide down his body and start tickling his balls. "Come on, honey, you can't stay mad at me," she cooed. Maybe he decided he might not tell her he forgave her just yet. Her fingers gently wrapped around his manhood and slowly started stroking it up and down. Within seconds, he felt himself getting hard. Jim closed his eyes and let out a small sigh as her long red hair teased his skin. The loving touch of her lips sent shivers down his spine as she kissed the head of his fully engorged friend. "Oh, God," he groaned. She already knew she was forgiven, but Cindy wanted to take it to the limit. She swung one leg over his torso and guided him inside her. She closed her eyes as she leaned forward, resting her hands on his tight abs as she moved back and forth, driving him deeper and deeper. "Oh, babe, I'm not going to last long," he groaned. "Me either," she replied. Moments later, she threw her head back as her body stiffened. That was Jim's cue, and it was right on time as they both surrendered to an intense pleasure. A month later, Cindy and Barbara were having lunch together. "You and Jim seem to be getting along. Does he still flirt with waitresses?" "Not as much," Cindy replied. "He's still his friendly self, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love that about him, but he does seem to pull back now and then." "That's all you really wanted, isn't it?" "Exactly." Barbara had to ask her next question, even though she thought she knew the answer. "So, have you heard from Bob lately?" No, and I'm a little insulted, to tell you the truth. One punch and he just disappears. The wimp. They both laughed at that.